Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira, and this is the Roundtable number 51. Thanks for joining us. This is a live show, and I am joined by my two guests, Brian Berletic of the New Atlas channel and Ian Miles Cheong of Ian Miles Cheong. Guys, it's great to see you again, and this is basically a comfy stream where we're going to shoot the shit about whatever is of interest right now in the news and in the world. So thank you so much for joining us all, and guys, how's it going?
Great.
Going pretty good.
Brian,
I'm ready for.
Go ahead.
I'm ready for a comfy stream despite my appearance. I'm ready.
Yeah, why don't you take off the tie?
Chat.
Yeah, you got a tie on. What the hell?
I could take.
Casual.
Yeah, I could take
Take
it off.
off.
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't want to because it's a clip-on. It's a clip-on. That's why.
Well, I'm going to prove. Yeah, because we were talking about myths that people create about you. And I actually have a lot of people who say it's a clip-on. It's not. I know how to tie it.
No. Let's stretch it out. Stretch it out, or we won't believe you. Stretch it out on camera.
Okay, it's a real tie.
Ian,
That's
do we think it's a real tie? No, I think it's like slate of man. Slate of man. Yeah, but yeah. Well, now with the thing, you look like somebody like a Mao follower or something. But anyway, I'm sorry. This is a comfy stream. I'm a little bit punch drunk this Saturday, even though I haven't had any booze at all. I've just been on coffee and chocolate chip cookies. I think that might be it. And
I love coffee.
Yeah, cheers for coffee for the genius.
Yeah, actually, I have a coffee here too. Yeah,
nice.
Iced coffee.
Oh, by the way, Brian, I have to say this publicly. You are big on Twitter because of me. Never forget that.
It's true. I'm under your thumb. You got me to 30,000.
Because every time that he comes to like a round figure, like 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000, I like tell my followers to follow him. It just to take the piss out of him.
I mean, he's a good follower. He's a good follow. So
but he's big because of me. Fuck his analysis. Fuck that. Brilliant analysis that he delivers all the time. But anyway, I want to talk about the New York Times leak that is gaining all kinds of traction on Twitter and everywhere online of these leaked papers.
There's supposed to be 100 of them so far, I think.
Yeah, it's like a whole batch of them, and we've only seen like 8 pages so far, as I recall. And people who have seen this kind of printout say, "Yeah, that looks legit, just prima facie." Ian, I mean, you're on top of this shit. What do you think of it?
I think they're real. But there's a lot of chatter about whether the release was a psyop intended to fool the Russians, right? I think some Telegram posted one of the pictures and altered the box, right, that shows the number of casualties, the KIAs on both sides. Yeah. And it looks pretty unfavorable to Russia. But then if you actually check the numbers, it seems like the people who made the chart didn't do their due diligence, because the numbers, especially from the Russian side, not the Russian side, sorry, the Ukrainian side, appear to be mirroring what Oryx has reported or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. It doesn't seem real because, like, even just looking at Mariupol, right? 16,000 KIA, and yet it says like total overall only 15,000 total dead on the Ukrainian side. That is just unrealistic.
Yeah, I agree with that. You got to think about the timing too. It's right before Ukraine is supposed to kick off their offensive, which U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced. He's like, "Oh, it's going to be in 2 or 3 weeks." Why would you announce something like that? That's just something very odd about all of this. But you realize that the West is most certainly losing the war of attrition. So the only thing that they have left is deception, and then this could possibly be part of that. And as Ian's saying, look, if they got these numbers wrong like that and it's a genuine document, it just goes to show how detached from reality NATO.
It's sloppy.
That's scary. Yeah.
Like the number of Russian dead in the the unaltered document appears to mirror what the AFU itself is putting out, right? Their general staff puts those numbers out every single day, and they're bullshit numbers. But you can't believe them because they don't reflect what is actually happening on the ground. Looking at Telegram and Instagram and obviously TikTok, where Ukrainian soldiers are the ones posting these videos, talking about how they've lost half their units. I mean, none of this makes any sense if you look at the numbers.
Yeah, and there's something else too. It came out with the New York Times was mentioning it, right? And so it comes out in the New York Times. I'm assuming that somebody with an agenda in the U.S. government is pushing it out there. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of like a disinformation op or something like that. Or I've been like trying to 3D and 4D chess this bullshit and thinking to myself, maybe they're pushing it out because the offensive is coming, but they want to lay the groundwork how unprepared the Kiev regime forces are to explain away the loss during this offensive. Does that make sense to you guys?
Kind of.
Could be.
Because
I think
who's not fooled? The Russians aren't fooled because they know the numbers.
No, obviously not. They know what's going on. Yeah. I think
so
this might be a way for the U.S. government to fire back at Kiev, because I don't think they even know what Zelensky's up to, right? I mean, when Blinken says that they have no control over what Ukraine does, and that the war is is their initiative, maybe it's true. Maybe they're just not being told the actual numbers. They don't actually know.
But the U.S. of all countries has the ability to ascertain that. I mean, the BBC is tracking
the BBC
Russian losses,
but so why? I mean, I'm going back to, I'm thinking about when Egypt had the Arab Spring. Remember that? It had the Arab Spring, and the CIA had nobody on the ground. This is based on the leaked cables that went out on WikiLeaks years ago, right? And it showed that the U.S. had no idea what was actually happening in Egypt, and they were getting their news, their intelligence. They had no human intelligence, no human or SIGINT, and they were getting their news from the local newspapers as to where the Egyptian president was at the time, which is so absurd.
Well, yeah, because these papers kind of like show that if they're genuine, let's posit that they're genuine for a moment, then they're basically being spoon-fed information that the Kiev regime wants the Pentagon to know. And I've had on Larry Johnson, and he is of the opinion that the NATO and the Pentagon is kind of like flying blind because they don't actually know the numbers for anything, for the equipment sent, for the losses, nothing, and they're just going on with what Kiev is telling them. So,
or it's a document that Ukrainians might see, and they don't want to put a number that contradicts their number or something, or it's a document that at some level might see, and so they just put what the narrative on it, and it's kind of like, I think, like what Larry Johnson says he's talking about. They have the information, but they have to put the right answer. You know what I mean? They have to put the answer that their supervisor wants to see, regardless of what information they actually have.
In case of a leak, right? In case of a leak, and this is clearly a leak. So now that we can look at it, we can be like, oh yeah, the Russians are losing, right? That's going to be the public's narrative. The Russians are losing. The Ukrainians are in fact winning by a factor of 10-1. I mean, that obviously is bullshit, but that's what the narrative is, right? And so when you look at the leaked documents, it's like, oh yeah, so they are winning. They're not lying to us. Everything's fine,
Yeah, and going back to the WikiLeaks thing and Egypt, actually the U.S. engineered that protest in Egypt and actually the entire Arab Spring. So somebody obviously knew what was going on. They might not have known where the Egyptian president was. Is that what you meant? Like,
yeah.
They triggered it, they got it going, but they didn't actually have intelligence about how the government was reacting to it. I actually could believe that to a certain extent.
Which really shows the, like when you think of the CIA and, you think of movies, right? They're super competent people, they're all top secret agents, they're action heroes. The reality is that they're just a bunch of paper pushers and they don't even have the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and in these leaked documents, there were some really troubling numbers insofar as actual equipment and like artillery shells and rockets and so forth that were like pretty disquieting. I mean, there's one category where they were basically saying that they're out as of the 1st of March, of just altogether out of something. I think it was artillery shells or something.
Artillery shells, for their M155s. Yeah, I mean, I think that is real. I don't think that's bullshit. I mean, it does tend to line up with what we've seen where, in Bakhmut, a lot of the artillery is just being fired by the Russians. The Ukrainians are not really firing back.
Yeah, but it could be that.
But
go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just going to say, they were talking about relatively recently, they were talking about surging whatever's left in the U.S. and European inventories of 155 millimeter artillery rounds, surging that in so that when the offensive begins, all the artillery shells are going to be with them. And whoever's got guns anywhere else, forget about them, because they're going to throw everything that they have into the offensive. And the New York Times, in another article recently, they were talking about how Ukraine, and I think we've all talked about this before also, they have these troops that they're getting ready for the offensive. They're not going to send them to Bakhmut to relieve the forces fighting there, because they are saving them specifically for the offensive. If I was Russia, I would assume the worst and prepare for the worst, because I think they're going to throw everything they've got. This is the last throw of the dice. So they're going to put everything they have behind it.
That's exactly
like what. Like, by the way, we have to analyze Bakhmut itself, right?
We'll get to it. But I just want to say real quick, quick parentheses. I want to thank the mods who are in the chat: Zariel, Pamela Hauptman, and I think I saw JJ is there as well. Thanks, guys, for moderating. Really appreciate it. And be nice, everybody in chat, because the mods have the power of God in the chat. So be nice. Anyway, Ian, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh no, it's
what
fine.
Were you saying?
Yeah, no. I was talking about, like, what is Bakhmut and why are the Ukrainians sending so many forces there, right? What is the point of that? And I think the conclusion I've come to is that it was a time delaying strategy, right? For them to, they have a bunch of guys who are training to use all the new equipment that they're being sent, and obviously the guys who are being sent to Bakhmut, it's a meat grinder, are conscripts, right? They take them from Odessa, from all these other places where they're, ethnic Russians, ethnic Hungarians, ethnic Romanians, sending them to die. They're low quality units, so to speak, and so it's no big loss to even spend their lives, while their main forces, the guys who know how to actually fight, are being trained and for a proper offensive. So I think that's what Bakhmut is for.
And on top of that, they may launch at least part of the offensive in the Donbas region. Everyone keeps talking about Zaporozhye, but it could be along two axes at least. Just like in the fall, it's almost hard to believe that they would launch only one offensive in one direction. And there's probably even a third option where they're looking at somewhere along the line of contact where Russian forces are weakest. They're probably thinking of trying to exploit that just to see what happens.
Speaking of Zaporozhye, remember when they had that failed offensive, right? The beachhead, something like 90 soldiers died. They sent like 600 people over by water, right, on all the swift boats. It was a disaster because the Russians were prepared, and they claimed that never happened. For the longest time, all these OSINTers on Twitter were like, "Nah, this is Russian disinformation. This is not happening. Those dead bodies floating downstream, just ignore those. They're not real.
They're mannequins.
The civilians, the mannequins and civilians. Yeah, okay." And now it turns out that was in fact what happened. Total disaster.
No, it's the amount of bullshit and lies that are going on that it just makes it impossible for the West to have any kind of political sense as to where they are in this conflict and what intelligent decision to make. Because if you're being lied to that grotesquely, you have no real idea of what's going on, and so you don't get any popular support to say, okay, let's go to peace now. Because right now, Blinken said yesterday, I do believe, he said that the United States would not, basically he said the United States would not allow any kind of ceasefire until Kiev regime forces are on the doorstep of Crimea, which I thought was laughable. That's, okay, so there's going to be a ceasefire until the moon turns to cottage cheese or some shit like that. Come on, but
it's like they believe their own lies, right? This is just like, I don't know if YouTube will demonetize this, so I won't mention it specifically.
I'm not monetized, so it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Okay, so like COVID 2 years ago, when that was happening,
don't mention the medicine. Just call it the medicine.
Yeah, I wouldn't mention it. Nothing to do with the medicine. More like the lockdowns, right? The nudge teams in the UK in particular. This was something that was published on Unheard by actually one of the founders of the nudge team at Number 10, and he said that initially they wanted to lock people down because they thought it was like safe to do so, right? That would be like the safest thing to mitigate the loss of lives and so on, right? It was done with good intentions, but then eventually they started believing their own bullshit that they were putting out, and so everything was a justification for a lockdown, right? And it was to the point where they were ignoring the science, ignoring the data, ignoring the lethality rate of the virus itself to say that, oh my God, we're all going to die unless we lock down. And they believe their own lies, hurt their own economy. I would argue, like, crippled their own economy based on their own bullshit. Like, they just fell into the trap of believing their own lies. And I see the same thing happening here where, you have one side of the government, the U.S. government or propagandists working for them, whether it's Edelman PR or Ukraine itself, putting out some bullshit. And then the other side, isn't talking to what the other guys are doing, and they're believing their own lies, feeding their own narratives. And decisions are being made based on lies that do not actually benefit the Ukrainians or the Americans. It only benefits Russia because Russia's like operating on a different paradigm. They're operating on reality.
Yeah. I think that's probably accurate, by the way. I think that sometimes you shovel so much bullshit that you start spouting it yourself and you don't realize it. Yeah. I think that seems reasonable to me. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, well, you become a hostage to it in many ways too, even if you don't believe it. But you're like, well, we've like really, we've already said we're not ever. I mean, Putin is Hitler, so how can we possibly negotiate with him? Well, yeah, you painted yourself into that corner, and now you're going to have to figure out a way to get out, unless you're just going to keep going and see where this goes, which kind of seems like what they're doing. But Ukrainian forces getting close to Crimea, I mean, a lot of people didn't think the Kharkov or the Kherson offensives would take as much territory. They did conditionally. And there could conceivably be a way where Ukrainian forces get kind of close to Crimea, but I don't think that it's going to. I mean, does anyone really imagine that Russia is going to be like, oh yes, let's negotiate right away? They're not going to do that because the only way, and the only way they're going to get that close to Crimea is if Russian forces withdraw to preserve their fighting capacity. They will have conserved theirs. Ukraine will have lost God knows how many brigades getting that close to Crimea. And then back on the home front in Russia, Moscow is going to have all the political capital necessary to do another mobilization, to further mobilize the economy and industry. So actually, the better they do in the offensive, the worse it'll actually be for the ultimate outcome. After they run out of weapons and ammunition, and they're sitting there that far from the line of the original line of contact,
stretched out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we saw in Bakhmut, right? Initially, it was a good push. It was a strong push. The Russians retreated, not a real retreat, but a tactical retreat. Brought them into the pocket. It's kind of like Corset Pocket in World War II when the Soviets lured the Nazis in, and now we're seeing a repeat of that, except it's with Ukrainians. Well.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something. About this Zaporozhye, this famed Zaporozhye offensive, or wherever it's going to take place. Have the Russians, have they ever gotten a full-on offensive by Kiev regime forces, and the Russians prepared, not like in Kharkov where it was just a token force, but they were prepared with defensive lines, and their defensive lines were broken? Has that ever happened in this conflict so far?
No, I don't think so.
Not that I can think of. As a matter of fact, around Kherson, they didn't even have the sort of defenses that they've built now. The layered defenses and the type of defenses that they have now are so extensive in size and scope. They didn't have that around Kherson. They had some certain things, but not this extensively. And they were still wiping out brigades worth of.
Yep.
And now, and I point this out all the time, then they had mostly Soviet-era equipment that they were familiar with. Now they've got these guys that have been trained up just a couple of weeks on Western gear that they've never touched or seen before. I don't see how that can.
Stuff. Yeah. I mean, it might be effective in the first few days, perhaps, but we're talking non-stop firing of the equipment that they have. That stuff, it has durability on it, and it will run out without proper maintenance, without the proper know-how on how much they can use this equipment without it breaking down. I mean, I don't see them being able to win any sort of battle of attrition. Like, it's just not going to work for them.
Yeah, that's the thing with these tanks. They break down. They have to be serviced. Who do they have there to service them? where are the facilities to service them? They got to go all the way to Poland. I'm pretty sure that's like, depending on where you are, almost 1,000 kilometers. And then they're gonna, it's gonna be that distance that they're traveling, the time that they're at the facility, and the distance that they have to travel to get back. And so, and a certain percentage of them, they're all gonna eventually have to get repaired.
Yeah, I don't think they're even going to bother. I think they're just like they're write-offs. Like all these tanks that they're sending there, they're just write-offs. They expect to lose them.
Well, that's going to be a total disaster then.
Oh, yeah, so basically,
I mean, Bakhmut is a graveyard.
Yeah, it's going to be just a fucking PR stunt to throw all these people to their deaths, the equipment destroyed for a few days of headlines, and then what happens after that?
Yeah.
Maybe this is gonna be they're gonna do this, and then they're preparing their a wider intervention. Again, like since the very beginning, I've always had this feeling that they're going to try to carve out some sort of proxy, not proxy, like a buffer zone in Western Ukraine, and they could continue fighting, and they could hope that Russia won't strike them if they inside that buffer zone, and they can shorten the lines of contact. Lines of communication that way significantly. That's what what else could they do?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think that they're going to make an effort in Western Ukraine. I mean, that seems really built in. Zelensky himself going to Poland the other day and kissy with Duda and they're all like buddies and this Polish Ukrainian Commonwealth now that they're basically talking about, right? And
Poland loves this. They want to take over Lvov.
Yeah. Well, not the Polish people. The Polish people are a little bit scared of this whole situation, but
because it involves them.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And
because the Polish leadership has the idea of recreating the Polish-Lithuanian Empire, right? Like that's their grand strategy. It's such a pipe dream, but I mean, this is why they're being hostile towards Germany. Every time Germany messes up just a tiny bit, they're like, reparations. $2 trillion.
Okay. It sounds worse than I'm not going to say it. I'm going to talk about reparations in California, but we'll leave that in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But no, I mean, like the notion of Poland getting into this, of being the next proxy up to bat, it seems insane. And also, the Russians have said very explicitly that the territory of Ukraine is not a war zone, they haven't called it that, but that the Russians will strike at anything military within the Ukrainian border. And so if they cross the border and go in, they're going to get the shit kicked out of them, because also something else that's emerging, and Brian can speak to this much better than I can, finally the Russians have total air superiority over Ukraine, it seems. Is that accurate?
Well, They have increasing activity along the line of contact, but Ukraine still has a lot of these air defense systems, and Russia really can't risk flying over where they might be operating. So a lot of people ask me, why doesn't Russia just bomb the supply lines coming right over the border from Poland like they did in Syria? They were bombing supply lines as they were coming out of Turkey. Why don't they do that in Western Ukraine? Because the air defense systems there would probably shoot these warplanes down. In Syria, they only had the man-portable systems. They don't have the altitude to hit a Russian bomber up there, but something like a Buk that Ukraine might be operating, that actually can. So that has always been the problem. They're using these GLONASS-guided glide bombs. That is actually having a big impact along the line of contact. And I think it's going to increase incrementally from there, and they're going to be able to operate further and further over the line of contact. But I wouldn't expect them to be doing anything over all of Ukraine. But conversely, NATO cannot either. Ukraine cannot either, because Russian air power and air defenses extend quite a bit across the line of contact.
Yeah, so how would the Russians, apart from using like hypersonic missiles, because I'm assuming there's a finite stock of those, so you can't use them willy-nilly, but you can use enough of them, I suppose, to really put a dent into any Western incursion into Western Ukraine, right?
What they could do is, as soon as anyone crosses the border, they just, cruise missiles or whatever they have that is capable of doing something, even if it's minimum. just to make the point that whatever you put in Western Ukraine, we're going to attack it. We're not going to recognize some sort of buffer zone. And then what they want to do is they want to establish those repair facilities much closer to the line of contact to shorten that 1,000-kilometer trip. And if they know that it's just going to get blown up anyway, then they really can't. They can't do that. But it's hard to tell because Russia is extremely patient. They think everything out several moves ahead. This is what they were doing in Syria. Some things didn't seem to make sense at the time, but now in hindsight, it was obvious they had to do it that way. So maybe that's we just kind of have to wait and see.
That's true. I mean, they're operating on a different time frame than NATO is, because NATO countries have to deal with the fact that they operate on a scale of 2 to 4 years or something, right? That because that's when you're going to have the next election, new people come in, and then they change the strategy completely. Russia doesn't have to worry about that. They have the mandate of the people, just like China. They can play a long game. They can play a 10-year game if they want to.
Also, just the aspect of attrition, Russian military industry just keeps expanding. The U.S. and Europe, they know that they have to if they want to win. But the whole way their whole economy is structured is you have these companies, they don't want to expand because they know, the moment the conflict is over, all of that expansion, that is a loss, and they don't want
that happened during COVID, right? A lot of companies back, in 2020, they massively expanded their PPE manufacturing. And then the instant there was a lull, or perhaps they produced too many PPEs, these companies went bankrupt, literally bankrupt, because they hired too many people. They built too many manufacturing facilities that just couldn't, they were overproducing, and the demand just disappeared. And, that's why I think they started importing PPEs from China, because China can do it at scale. They can scale up, scale down, no big deal, right? These factories produce many different things. In America, it's not the same thing. So like you said, right, if they were to start producing certain kinds of ammunition or certain kinds of vehicles or whatever, the demand is just going to dry up, and then you're going to be left with a bunch of inventory that you just can't sell.
Yeah, and people you hired that now you got to fire them. You have all of this equipment, you have to do something with it. And that's the difference between, say, in Russia or China, their defense industry is purpose-driven, while in the West, it has always been profit-driven. And to the extent where the whole reason NATO is transferring this myriad of main battle tanks, Challenger, Leopards, is because each country wanted to have their own main battle tank, no matter how little sense it actually made. They wanted to make those profits. They all wanted a piece of the main battle tank market. And so now this is the mess that has been created, down the line from that poor decision making.
Yeah, some of them got lucky. I mean, like Poland managed to sell 100 tanks to South Korea because they couldn't send them anywhere else. So lucky for them. But Germany's not so lucky. Nobody wants to buy their equipment. Nobody wants to buy American tanks.
Yeah, Germany's a shit show right now. But anyway, that's for another story. But okay, so right now we're waiting for this offensive that the Americans, at least, that the U.S. State Department is saying is imminent. In the next few weeks, 2 weeks, 4 on the outside. When do you guys expect it to happen?
Hard to say, but I would say within a month.
I honestly, I have no idea. There's no good time for them to launch the offensive because the offensive is a bad idea. It's just a really bad idea. It all comes down to Russia has a huge amount of long-range firepower. Ukraine doesn't. So when they want to move lines on a map, they have to concentrate a bunch of guys and just kind of just absorb as much Russian firepower as possible and hope they can push enough guys through to get close enough to inflict losses on Russia to compel those units on the line to withdraw. That's their strategy. That is a terrible strategy.
And they're not even communicating properly. There's, again, this is more anecdotal, but there's so many videos where we hear of blue on blue attacks, right, on the Ukrainian side. Because, the territorial army doesn't speak the same language as these conscripts. So, you'll have guys responding in Russian and they'll attack their position. They'll think, oh, the Russians are there. It's like, what are you guys doing? Don't you talk to each other properly? What the hell?
That's actually something that's been reported even by the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Yeah.
There was this article that I always refer to. They're describing the fighting around Kherson. And we were following it on Telegram, and these were the impressions that we were getting. And then the Washington Post was writing about this, and it was very obvious that's what was going on. Communication was a problem. The fact that they just don't have the ability to respond to these long-range weapons, the electronic warfare, the drones, all of it all adds up. It's very lopsided.
Yeah, and there's no joint use of forces, right? I mean, like if you're on the ground and you're part of a platoon, you cannot just call in artillery. It doesn't work like that. There's no cohesion at all. So, like especially in Bakhmut, you have these guys being sent to the front, asking for fire support. They're promised fire support. Nothing happens. They all die. Right? They're forced to retreat. Happens every single day. Every single time this happens, it's on Telegram. Where was our fire support? Where's our air support? Oh, it doesn't exist.
Hey, Brian, I heard something. This is a few days old, so maybe this is no longer the case. But I heard that just a few days ago, the Kiev regime was actually sending in their top-tier fighters to protect the flanks in Bakhmut. I mean, like still attacking, still trying to turn around something that seems inevitable at this point. Is that accurate?
I honestly, I don't know. I pay attention a little bit to the day-to-day tactical minutia, some people call it, and but I you can never tell for sure. And if I knew the disposition of Ukrainian and Russian troops, I'd be a lot more confident about making a lot of predictions and stuff. We just don't know. We just don't know. But if they are,
they're getting like high value targets killed. I mean, the Russians are scoring HVTs one after the other, and they're posting their videos and photos and what they've done, since 2014. These are evil men. They're like, yeah, we took them out. And Ukrainians are confirming it because they're holding funerals for these guys. And these are like good soldiers. They're professional veterans, right? They're not some conscripts. They're like high value.
That's true. And they're from like these volunteer units, which means Nazi units. And they're the ones who have over the last, since 2014, really, they've been getting the best equipment and the most support and training, best facilities, and so they are there. I mean, we know that those guys are there. So
they're getting killed.
So they might not be taking from the forces that they're building up for the offensive, but I don't think those are their best troops either. Because like they're guys that are going to the UK to train. A lot of them are conscripts. They don't have any military experience. They're getting a very abbreviated basic training, not nearly long enough, and then they're going to send them back into the. It's crazy.
It's just on a personal level, think of it. You're just some random guy one day. You get conscripted and shipped off to England, of all places, to get your basic military training and any kind of specialization in 2 weeks, and then shipped back to the front. It's like the weirdest tour. I've actually heard of some people. I don't know if this is rumor or not, but I've heard that some of the Ukrainian conscripts who got to the UK demanded political asylum. Have you heard that? That was a rumor I heard. So
I've heard. I couldn't confirm it, but
I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't blame them for doing that.
I mean, I would do it if I was one of them. It's like, do I want to fight and die for this cocaine addict? No.
But the UK government would be like, that's not the point here. We're not about that, actually. Sorry if you got the wrong impression. But
if they're smart, they'll travel to South America. Travel to South America, travel to Mexico, a place with no extradition.
No, I mean, like, look, it's we're laughing about it, but this is tragic. I mean, they're just
it is tragic.
Meat grinding the whole fucking country. That's the thing.
Just a brain drain. I mean, like, Ukraine is finished. Even after this conflict ends, right? They're done. I mean, all these people who have left the country, they're not moving back to Kiev or Lvov. They don't live there anymore. They're done. They're finished. There'll be
two key classes of people left: the smart ones with brains and
I know a few,
and the women. So demographically and as
it's just old people left there and poor young people. It's poor young men who are, it's like, okay, so it's finished.
It's bundled into vans.
I'm sorry?
No, they're bundling them into vans and bringing them to the front. And actually, the New York the New York Times article about how I think it was the one where they say they don't have enough weapons, and they're talking about how in Bakhmut they were just sending territorial defense because they didn't want to tap into the forces they're getting ready for the offensive, and they're basically just saying, yeah, we're just throwing bodies at Bakhmut. That's what they were accusing Russia of. It was actually them doing it. How many times has that happened?
Every single time. It's the same thing with the whole what did they call it? You know how Wagner is recruiting from prisons, right? And they were saying, oh, these are prison brigades or whatever term it is they use, right? For the prison brigade.
There's Saudakar.
There's Saudakar. Yeah, from Dune. Yeah. I mean, with Wagner, at least they provide them proper training. It's extensive, extremely extensive, and compared to the Ukrainians, who are also recruiting for prisons.
Yeah, but also there's something else too, that the Wagner that as I understand it, the Wagner that they're recruiting from prisons, they're recruiting guys who already were soldiers.
Yeah. Okay. Military veterans. Yeah. Guys who've been in there for like drug crimes or gang violence, whatever. I mean, a lot of people.
But they know how to be soldiers already.
They know how to fight.
Went through 2 years or whatever. Perhaps they don't know how to fight, but they know how to be a soldier. I mean, Brian has said multiple times that training to be a soldier is not different. Like something that you put on the uniform and you're done, right?
No.
And so
that's something. That's Malcolm Nance. That's Malcolm Nance puts on a uniform. Certainly knows how to fight. He's a genius.
It's funny how it turned out that it was a huge. Yeah, all these guys that we suspected were huge frauds. Eventually, was it the New York Times also?
It was.
Eventually did a whole article about how they are actual frauds.
They're actual frauds, and Adam Kinzinger's tied to it. I mean, this guy has a lot to answer for. He was on the board of directors of that fraudulent organization that was stealing money. Right, stealing money intended for the soldiers. Yeah. How much did he get paid? We don't know. There needs to be
Isn't
hearing
that the problem? Isn't that the problem, though, that the U.S. has when it does all? That's what their problem was in Afghanistan, all the way back to Vietnam. That was their problem. They have an insidious foreign policy. You're not going to attract people who fundamentally believe in it and will execute it because they actually believe in it. You're just going to attract other people who want to fleece the system and rob everybody. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. It's even worse
Rachel
now.
Maddow, when she was a proper journalist, she did this huge report. I remember it from many, many years ago. It was about Afghanistan. This was back when she was a journalist. She went there and she was surveying all these mansions that were built on U.S. tax dollars. Like $2 billion a mansion. Who built it and why? Oh, it went to a local warlord. That's where the money was going, right? And CIA contractors, they were just taking the money for themselves. It's like, so all these tax dollars that were intended to, rebuild the country, build an infrastructure, it went on mansions. They were building like residential apartments for themselves when it should have been going to roads and schools and things like that. And that's why Afghanistan is as much of a shithole as it is right now.
Yeah, and if you read the Special Inspector General reports on that, which are extremely boring, but for some reason I read a bunch of them, and you look at the programs that they were laying out, it's like if they actually did all of these things, it would be the 51st state of America. Might be nicer than some states in America at this point, but that's exactly what happened. The contractors went in. They don't care if this project gets done properly or not. They want to do the bare minimum, get their money, and go spend it back at home. They don't care about Afghanistan.
Even the schooling there was bad. I mean, they founded American University in Kabul, right? And they were supposed to be teaching girls education and creating a new generation of Afghans to lead the country. But instead, they brought in these race grifters. They were teaching them critical race theory and queer theory. And it's like, do you really think this is going to land with the Afghan people? All they're doing is providing propaganda material for the Taliban to use against them, which is, by the way, is what they did, right? We only know about this because the Taliban used it in their propaganda efforts to drive out the Americans. They're like, they're teaching your kids to be gay and trans. Like, a regular Afghan is a Muslim is going to be like, hell no, I'll take the Taliban.
Yeah. It's so funny because this whole foreign policy of the United States, because it's fundamentally dishonest, then every step it takes is a further step in dishonesty and grift. And like you said, Brian, it just attracts the absolutely worst bottom of the barrel people. I mean, like real grifters, And even though the three of us have all been accused of grifting somehow, And I want to know how. I want to know exactly how am I grifting on a demonetized channel, right? How exactly am I making what?
I said, where's my money? Like where the hell's my money? Yeah.
And like the other day we were talking with Russians with Attitude, and we were talking about like other like pro-Ukrainian, pro-Zelensky websites, right, or channels on YouTube and whatever. The views that they get are astronomical,
insane, right?
I mean, and they're monetized, fully monetized.
Yep.
And they get like every day they're putting out a video, and they get like 500,000 views, 800,000 views. And for those of you in chat who don't know the economics of it, you get paid per 1,000 views, right? So if you get, like, say, a video that hits 800,000 views, you'll get between $4 and $7 per 1,000. So let's say it's just $5 for the sake of easy math, right? You're talking about $400 for just the one fucking video. And if you're producing those every day, at the end of the month, you're gonna get a nice little kitty. And that's what happens with guys. This is a genuine suggestion. I suggest we just stop this, realist bullshit that we're into of like talking about reality, and just go with the grift, man. I mean, like we can.
I could probably come up with a very convincing narrative that would be much more convincing than what these idiots are.
Yeah,
look at liars. Look at the chat. Give me a +1 if he looks credible, no matter what he says. Okay, if he sounds, I mean. Brian, please go ahead and say that the Zelensky regime forces are outside of Moscow, and say it like you mean it. Come on.
I couldn't do that with a straight face.
Oh, come on.
I gotta look. If I was gonna do this, I would have to, get into character, do some method acting, be pro-Ukrainian for about a week.
Gotta be zen, Zelensky's good. Zelensky's good. He's liberal democracy. We must support liberal democracy. Ukraine is the last stand for liberal democracy in the world. And if they don't win, Russia wins, and Russia's communist, and we got to take them down.
Trans rights are human rights.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny seeing the angles that people take to defend Ukraine and to attack Russia, right? Like if you're conservative, you'll buy into the whole Russia's communist narrative. I see it all the time with these fucking conservative grifters on Twitter who are promoting Ukraine. They're like, Russia is communist. It's a communist state. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, who are you fooling? Well, I guess they're fooling a lot of people because a lot of people still believe that.
Yeah.
Fucking boomers, right?
A lot of money,
They are, yeah.
That's the thing. And by the way, I mean, I have to emphasize, whenever I talk about the sides in this war, I never refer to the Ukraine side. I always call it the Kiev regime, because it's the Kiev regime that's driving this. The
that
Ukraine
is correct.
People and the Ukraine nation are just dying because of this fuckstick. And by the way, my thinking at this point is that okay, I'm going to throw it out there, and you guys tell me if you think I'm off my rocker as usual, or maybe I'm onto something. My thinking is that when Bakhmut, it's clear that Bakhmut is a lost cause. And the Zelensky regime put a lot of political chips on this, right? And if this offensive is clearly a failure, it's just like loss after loss, and the line just doesn't move. I mean, a loss would be simply that the contact line doesn't move. That would be a loss. And I asked you guys before if you could recall a time when the Kiev regime forces had gone whole hog against a defended line of the Russians, and if they'd broken through, and neither of you could recall. I can't recall either. So a loss would be simply, the offensive is on, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks pass, and the line doesn't move. That most everybody would say that was a lost offensive. My thinking is that after that, Zelensky is in a split. I think that he's going to flee to the west because he's already been put on notice by his own people in Kiev.
Yeah,
that he cannot sign.
But that means existential.
Yeah. No,
like exactly. the whole deal with him not being able to negotiate with the Russians unless Putin's put out of power, right? And Russia itself is split up or some bullshit thing. It is an ultimatum not to Russians. It is an ultimatum to Zelensky. It's a way to hold him accountable because at the end of the day, he has he's got power, but he's beholden to the nationalists under him. They could take him out in an instant, in a heartbeat. They feel like he's not serving their interests. They'll take him out. And there's a good reason for that, right? It's not because they don't like him or whatever. It's because it's existential for them. Because if he makes a deal with the Russians, they're done. They're finished.
Yeah,
they're going to be denazified.
Yeah.
And so my thinking at the end of the shit show would be when Zelensky flies the coup, and I would think that in Kiev there'd be this incredible political infighting between these different little factions. Because in a weird way, I think that Zelensky is both the hostage to these people and also the linchpin, if you think about it. Because with him in power, he's the focus of everything, right? But if he disappears, or he flees, he's assassinated, he gets hit by a bus, then the whole shit show in Kiev would devolve into this power struggle. I mean, remember, a few months ago when there was this big purge and the minister of Defense's helicopter was shot down. And by the way, did you notice that
Interior
minister, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that whole news just vanished. It just like it never happened. I mean, that was that shows to some kind of infighting going on.
It's still infight. It's still ongoing, right? I mean, like right now, his former second in command, I forget the guy's name, the chief propagandist guy, right? Who's no longer part of the government. Arrestovich, yeah. I mean, he's put out some new interviews and new videos where he's talking about the corruption that's ongoing.
Where the fuck is that guy? Where the fuck is that guy? Because I saw
he's always on TV, though. He's always on TV.
Is he in Ukraine or elsewhere?
I'm not sure. Like, because I would imagine he's not in Ukraine anymore.
If he's in Ukraine,
you could get out. You should probably get out.
If I was
him, I would get out.
Or Latvia or something. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in Ukraine anymore, given what he's saying about them. I mean, he said that Ukraine is a shit show. Literally, just word for word, Ukraine is a shit show. It's done. It's finished. Like, no matter if we win or lose, it's done. It's finished. The guy's a realist. For all the propaganda bullshit that he put out in the early days, now it's like, okay, I got to accept reality, and I'm the only one saying it. It's like, that sucks, dude.
It's true too, because even if the offensive succeeds and they gain territory, what are they doing after that? And then
what's the end game?
There's nothing. And as long as Russia doesn't make any sort of catastrophic mistake, they are still going to be in a much better position at the end of the offensive. Even if, again, it's just like with Kharkov and Kherson, everybody made such a big deal about that loss of territory. But look at where things are right now. If they didn't preserve their fighting capacity, and they lost thousands of Russian troops trying to cling to Kharkov or Kherson, we wouldn't be talking about the mismatch in industrial output right now. That is a real problem that even the West has to come to grips with. So. Yeah, people don't seem to get that. Like, every time I go on one of those Twitter spaces, right, you have like some pro-Ukrainian voice. They're always regurgitating the same lie about Russia's policy. They're like, Russia operates by a Cold War paradigm where they believe in throwing human waves into people, human waves, and they don't care about attrition or the loss of lives. It's like, that is the complete opposite of what Putin's doing. He recognizes that Russia is in a precarious position right now where it doesn't have a massive population, right? It has to get its population density up. Otherwise, it's not going to survive the next 50 years, just like many other countries. Italy's done. Japan is finished, right? Russia cannot fall down that same route where they just don't have enough men and all the women are fleeing to the West or something, which would obviously help the West. They have to build up their social infrastructure, which is exactly what they're doing. So they cannot afford to waste lives. And there is people don't seem to realize, again, that Putin is not a dictator. He's not ruling by fiat. Although he does have the mandate of the people, he still has to have their support, right? He has to do things that are in their interest. And if they see that too many soldiers are dying and for nothing, he's done, right? And he recognizes this. He's a realist. So when people say, oh, they're just like the Soviets, they don't care if they lose 100,000 men in one day. No, bullshit. That's not what it is at all. That's the reason why they pulled out of Kherson and Kharkov, because they realized it was pointless to fight there, right? So they did a tactical retreat, and that made sense. And now they're in a stronger position than ever. Now, getting to the point I was going to make afterwards, I was going to say that Russia has no reason to negotiate right now. They're in a winning position. They just have to keep going and going and going and going, perhaps even push to Odessa, right? And then when they get what they want, they can be like, okay, let's talk. We got what we want. Let's talk. Also, there's nothing to negotiate about because the West wants the division and destruction of the Russian Federation.
We're talking to them.
And China also. This is why they really don't want to talk with the West, because what's the point? You have to change the reality on the ground, and then once you've done that, then you can start talking again. I agree completely with that.
And
Ukraine cannot seem to get Xi on the phone call.
No, he's like, no.
He's like, nah, I don't want to talk to you. Yeah, like we'll let the Russians deal with you.
Macron and van der Leyen showing up in Beijing on separate flights, apparently. Which is,
she wasn't invited. Macron invited her after the fact. Yeah.
Okay.
Macron's like, oh, I got a pal. Yeah, I got a pal. And none of them agreed it. You know, they didn't greet them at the airport. Didn't get like a warm welcome. You know, nothing like that.
No, Ursula von der Leyen went through the regular arrival gate at the fucking airport.
To get like her, she got to get her visa.
Yeah, she's like the president of the EU, for crying out loud. And the Chinese are like, no. I mean, that is just the humiliation.
That's a faux pas as well. I mean, Macron spoke for double the length of Xi, and he was visibly annoyed that everybody, you know, like I'm talking Western media, were like, yeah, Xi doesn't like the fact that Macron is talking longer than he is, because Xi's remarks are extremely short, had nothing at all to do with Ukraine, nothing at all, because he doesn't want to talk about that, because he knows there is nothing to be said about it with France, for example. Who the hell is France to bring it up, right?
Yes, and so French Empire, Ian. Don't you understand?
France is losing all of its control in Africa right now, and China is a direct rival to them, right? So there's nothing to talk about. And of the 46 terms that they came up with, like, you know, their mutual agreements, 46 of them, 45 were about trade and everything. Only one of them was about Ukraine. It didn't even mention Ukraine; just mentioned conflicts. Wow. Yeah, the Chinese don't want to talk to the French about this because there's nothing to talk about. All they did was like, when Macron was going on about Ukraine and how we need to fight the Russians, blah 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 blah. China was like, no, let's talk peace, nothing else. We don't want to talk about.
By the way, did you see that how Xi did the same thing that Putin did with the table? You know, remember the picture of
the long table,
like one end of the enormous table, and he had the EU commissioner and Macron there, that round table. They look like in another country. I mean, that's how big that fucking table was. And I'm like, don't you get it?
And you're describing all of this, and then when you read the Western media, they're like, China and France agree to peace in Ukraine. Like they're working together now against Russia. I mean, do they think they can convince Beijing that they're already side by side with Russia, being encircled and contained, and they know they have to fight their way out, and they know that if they negotiate or compromise at all, it's just going to be the opportunity the West uses to reassert themselves. They know that. They're not dumb. So I don't understand why they're going there and trying to lecture China. Just you lecture someone like that, you talk to them like that, you achieve nothing, you convince them of nothing. You're still where you began. It just comes across as a tremendous weakness, actually.
It's rude, right? Von der Leyen,
it's rude too, yeah.
She warned Xi directly without, you know, like just speaking to him, more like giving a press conference, warned him about any sort of changes in the status quo, referring to Taiwan, of course. Do you think he liked that? I mean, like, you have to respect China's sovereignty, whatever your views are. Even America views Taiwan as a part of China. And so when you, the EU, go over there and you have no real power because you're a bunch of clowns, and you tell China that you will not move on Taiwan, which is, by the way, your own territory, do you think they like that? It's like, excuse me, like, don't tell me how to raise my child, you know? Who the hell do you think you are? You come to my house and you tell me how to raise my child? Really? No way.
And even the EU and France and all of these countries have a one China policy. So can you imagine her lecturing China about how Russia is not recognizing the sovereignty of Ukraine, while at the same time being fully side by side with the U.S. violating Chinese sovereignty regarding Taiwan? Because they're all doing it. It's a team effort. The U.S. is leading it. The UK, the EU, Australia, they're all playing a role in undermining China's sovereignty regarding Taiwan. And so it's just this blatant hypocrisy. And I think just the whole world collectively is so tired of it. And there's no reason for China or Russia to give into this. They understand it actually is existential for them. The West pretends that it is, but for Russia and China, it actually is.
Especially the foundation of focus. What a terrible acronym.
Yeah, they gotta workshop these things a little. Yeah, they have all kinds of resources. Yeah.
Yeah, fuck us. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you're the good guys, and you're called fuck us. That is nice. Yeah. What is it? France, Australia, and America. Yeah, fuck us, and I guess England. But what a joke.
And look, like they have to have a globe. They should keep a globe somewhere where they do their work and look at it and look at what AUKUS or whatever it's called now. France is involved. Look on a map, and it's like, here's China, and then you have like almost the extreme opposite ends of the globe. All of these countries that are getting together for this alliance against China. It's so ridiculous. And unfortunately, so many people in the West take it for granted that this is just what the U.S. and Europe does. They still do this. It's the year 2023, and they're still doing it.
This is like the last breaths of a dying empire. You know, when we talk about empire, we're not just talking America here. We're talking about the unipolar liberal world order. That's what it is, right? All these countries, these Western countries, formerly great, shadows of themselves, and now it's like you have scraps of them. They're a shadow of themselves. Previously, they were all independent, individual empires. Well, except for Australia, which is part of the UK, but they used to be strong on their own, and now it's like, you guys are so weak that you're conglomerating. What the hell?
I think also there's something else too, that the way that the Russians and the Chinese are approaching this whole situation, I think that a number of statisticians and econometricians must have been looking at the data of the European and American economies and realized that the days of the dollar are numbered. The days of the dollar of the Western economies are numbered. They're way over indebted. And now with this shock of having cut them, literally cut their nose to spite their face with the sanctions, right, which blew up insofar as their energy resources, they are colossally fucked. And I think that part of the calculation of the Eurasian alliance, if you want to call it that, is that they're thinking, take it slow. There's no need to rush. Not rush in Ukraine, not rush in Taiwan, and let them fall of their own weight. Because I think that we would agree that Macron's flight to Beijing over Ukraine and Ursula going as well, that those are moves of desperation and weakness. I mean, there's no question about that. And so I think that basically the Eurasian alliance is saying, just wait them out. They'll just fall, and once they fall,
even Taiwan,
that there'll be. Yeah.
Like, I might be wrong about this, and I hope I'm right, because I don't want to see an invasion of Taiwan. I think that would be disastrous for everybody, right? But I can see them just waiting it out, because the Kuomintang, which is like historically the ideological opponent of the CCP, is now like they're the ones gunning for a unification with China, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like half the country, and so they're obviously not in America's pocket. The other team is, but they're saying let's wait it out. Let's talk peace. Let's talk peace. And 5-10 years, maybe even less than that, maybe 2 years down the line, with the way that the U.S. economy is going, with the way that all these other countries, like you look at Malaysia, look at Indonesia, they're all teaming up with Russia and China for their, and India as well, right? Teaming up with like the local trade and de-dollarization. Taiwan might be like, you know what? Let's join them. It makes more sense. At the end of the day, I mean, America's not going to carry us anymore. We can't depend on them.
I mean, that's what the Democratic. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to mention. You heard about Robert Burns, the former CIA head, flying out to Saudi Arabia and reading them the Riot Act. How could you have peace with Iran? Basically, he went and chewed them out over that shit. And now, on top of that, in Yemen, all of a sudden, somebody pulled out of Yemen, not the Saudis. The UAE? No, I don't know if the UAE is. I have no idea about that particular conflict, to tell you the truth. All I know is it's fucking horrifying, and even peace is breaking out there. I mean, like, the Americans are so frustrated that peace is breaking out in the Middle East.
Syria too. Everybody's welcoming them back in, right? Saudi Arabia's talking to Syria, welcoming them back to the Gulf states, because I think they see the writing on the wall here. I mean, it's the same thing with Israel, where previously, you have this enmity between Iran and Israel, and now you have chatter of Netanyahu wanting to talk to Iran, settle their differences, because the Palestinians, at the end of the day, are just a small problem that, if the Iranians stop giving a shit about the Palestinians, they'll no longer be a problem.
A lot of that problem in Israel has been just like everywhere else. It is an artificial conflict that could end. All of these people live side by side with each other. In Iran, there's still a huge, the largest Jewish community outside of Israel in the Middle East is in Iran, believe it or not. And these people can live side by side with each other. It's an artificial conflict that they keep going on purpose, just like they were doing with Saudi Arabia. You got to keep these countries hostage to these conflicts, dependent on U.S. military support. And it's imperialism 101, where you divide
and conquer.
Exactly. Yeah. And if these countries actually, like Israel, if they ever get a government that cares about this actual self-preservation of Israel, they would not be doing any of this. They would actually be talking to their neighbors. They would be resolving all of this. They would understand that their future lies with a sane foreign policy that is not predicated on constant warfare and having a militarized.
Same thing in South America, where a lot of the conflicts, put it past 30, 40 years, have been egged on by Americans. They don't have to fight.
Engineered,
right? Literally engineered by Americans to have them fight each other, because that's what U.S. foreign policy really actually is. They act like they're the world's police. That's the narrative. That's the PR spin that they put out. But in reality, they're the ones destabilizing these countries. I mean, look at what they're trying to do to Georgia.
You're basically describing a Democratic mayor in a Democratic city. Is that what you're describing?
But they use the exact same tactics on the American people, because they want to divide and distract the American people. And so they find all these political footballs to throw out into the mobs, so that they don't pay attention to the bigger issues that are actually...
Yeah.
BlackRock,
look at what BlackRock is doing in America, right? I mean, they're woke on the one hand, but on the other hand, they are like one of the largest owners of Smith & Wesson. So they're selling both sides. They're playing both sides.
They don't care. Their principle is more money and more power, and they use ideology as camouflage. And politicians do this too, where if details about their personal life come out, they're obviously not Christian, but in the U.S. you have to be Christian. And so they pretend to be Christian, like Obama and Bush, and these people are mass murderers. But they claim, they have to make sure they get videotaped going to church because they want to appeal to the average people. It's camouflage, because if they told you who they really were, what they really stood for, what they were really trying to achieve, nobody would support them.
That's right. Yeah, because none of them give a shit about the American people. That's for sure. I mean, none of the
absolutely,
none of them moves to benefit anybody. No.
I need a real quick intermission. Yeah, I'll be right back.
Sure, no problem. No, well, I'm actually, while we're at it, I'm going to go and get myself a cup of coffee. I'm going to just mute my camera, but I'm still listening. Yeah. While we're off a little bit, what happened with whatchamacallit, the Tennessee thing? Because I heard that there was like a whole shit show in Tennessee, and what the fuck happened there? I mean, you're on top of that, right?
Yeah. I've been covering that. So in Tennessee, obviously, you had the mass shooting, right? The trans terrorist shot up.
And now they're saying that there are 7 victims. What bullshit, motherfucker!
Bullshit. Fuck. It's like, this is the first time in history where an actual fucking terrorist has been painted as a victim, right?
Yeah.
And they're saying that the transgender community is under attack. And so you had the a riot in the state capitol, right, where 3 Democrats led the riot, right? They did the shouting and screaming, and they created like a violent mob in the state capitol. 2 of them got expelled. One of them wasn't, because some idiot Republican was like, oh, well, she wasn't screaming. She was the only white, the person's name is Jody, could be, I think it's a man, was the only one who wasn't like, fomenting a mob. So now the Republicans are being accused of racism, and they're not. It's just that you had the one holdout who refused to expel this person, refused to expel the ringleader of the riot. And so that is so stupid, right? And now you have what's her name? Kamala Harris is in Tennessee now, visiting the Tennessee 3. They're trying to paint these 3 well, 2 of whom are now expelled, lawmakers as martyrs because they defended trans rights. What a fucking joke. She didn't even travel down there to visit the victims of the trans terrorists. but they suddenly care. They only care about their own. They only care about the Democrats, right? They don't give a shit about the actual victims of the shooting. They'll mention them in passing sometimes. They won't mention that they're Christian, because that's why, that's a motivation for the attack, right? Although, it remains to be seen. They won't release a manifesto. Gee, I wonder why. Release the Tranifesto already, Release the Tranifesto immediately.
Yeah. No, and also, look, they killed this fucking insane because, with all the pronouns, I don't know what to call the fucking thing. This fucking killed 3 children. I mean, that is some cold-hearted shit, okay? I mean,
it's fucked up.
I mean, that's just way fucked up. I mean, that's beyond the pale. And apparently, I mean, what I heard, and I could be wrong, was that this fucking animal wanted to kill one of those children specifically because she was the daughter of some pastor. And that is just fucking horrifying, to kill a child. I mean, in prison, with good reason, they always murder the child murderers in prison, right? The other prisoners, because that's just beyond the pale.
It is beyond the pale.
I
was reading about
a liquor store owner by accident because you're robbing him. Okay, fine, but kids, that's just unconscionable.
It was brutal. It wasn't like this person, this terrorist, just sprayed and prayed. Right? It wasn't the case, right? If you read the there's logs. The police obviously did not going to release the video, but they said that one of the kids, the pastor's daughter, she basically kind of gave up her own life to save all her friends, because she ran for the fire alarm to save her friends, to give them time to escape by running for the fire alarm, and she was gunned down. Like how fucking inhumane and cold-blooded you have to be to be targeting a little child, Oh yeah, she's running for the fire alarm. Shoot her. Fucked up.
It's mental illness. These people are completely out of their mind, and instead of doing something about it to protect themselves and society, it's a political football. They throw it in. They know how obnoxious and destructive and divisive it is. They're doing it on purpose. And I think a sane society would demand leadership that is actually going to fix these problems. But what they've got the American people doing is debating it. There's no debate about this. Your society is falling apart.
Yeah. KJP is on television egging on the terrorists. They're like, you're under Karine Jean-Pierre, the press spokesperson for the White House.
Cunt. Yeah.
Yeah, she's on television egging them on, saying that the trans community is under attack. There's been nothing else like this in history. You're under attack right now. I mean, when you tell people these things, and they're already fucking unhinged because they're on HRT. They're fucking unhinged people, right? They genuinely believe that they're under attack. They genuinely believe there's a genocide going on. I mean, I watch a bunch of TikTok videos and YouTube videos and Twitter videos where you have these trans people blaming other people, blaming society for the things they do to themselves. They're like, if we kill ourselves, then you're to blame. You murdered us. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you holding all society hostage because you don't have your shit together? Really? We're responsible for you?
That's basically what they're doing. They're saying, do what I want, or I'll shoot myself.
In a sane society, this would be recognized as mental illness, and it would be dealt with. And you can look at other countries; they deal with this as a mental illness. They're not going to actually encourage this and use it. But the U.S., and it could be any issue. You could pick any issue. This is what they're doing with it. They find a way to polarize people to the absolute extremes of both ends of the spectrum, and they just get them fighting. And they're just going to do this. Yeah, it was what allows them to keep kicking the can down the road. If people had a functioning society and they were working together, they were finding common ground with each other, they would all be like, look, another common ground that we have is the government is completely insane and out of control, and we need real leadership. They're gonna have elections, and they're just gonna keep picking. People in America are voting for who they're voting against the person they hate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well, I mean, they hate this person.
Oh, yeah. You hate the other guy so much, so you vote for the loser. Yeah,
that's why they voted for Biden. That person. Yeah. So nobody likes Biden.
Like, nobody actually likes Biden, right? Yeah, but the media gunned up all this hatred for.
I do.
They gunned up all this hatred for Donald Trump. right? And you think of him whatever you will, but like he's not like as bad as they say he is. He's not the Antichrist, and yet that was the narrative. Anyone who was just watching MSNBC or CNN nonstop was like, "Oh yeah, we've got to vote for the senile old fuck here because the other guy's going to cause us to plunge into nuclear war." And here's the senile old fuck trying to turn the world into World War III right now. Everything they say that the other guy's going to do, they're doing themselves. They're projecting.
Yeah,
and there's continuity of agenda no matter who you vote for. I mean, that's
like
Trump was saying all the right things, just like Obama was when he was on the campaign trail.
I'm sure they wanted to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, they fill up their cabinet with establishment fixtures. Yeah. I mean, Trump didn't drain the swamp. He restocked it.
He restocked it. Like he got fucking John Bolton in there. People forget about that. Pompeo, Pompeo was like the big reason why Ukraine has as much weapons as it does right now. That was Pompeo's doing. And yet everybody's like, I get so irritated at these Trump cultists. I don't mind if you voted for Trump. I know a lot of friends who did. But like you have these Trump cultists like, no, Trump didn't do nothing wrong. He stopped the wars. He didn't reinvigorate it's like, you guys are just ignoring history here. What are you talking about? He literally prolonged this thing. Like even Obama didn't want to supply Ukraine with weapons. Even at the urging of Victoria Nuland, he was like, nah, this will make things worse. The guy's got a brain. But Trump was like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
What? And another thing is, I mean, I think Obama was totally involved in everything also, but maybe at that time it wasn't quite the right time to do it. Yeah, I mean, he's totally involved. Clinton, Trump. I mean, people hate him for all the wrong reasons because they imagine that he's some kind of Russian agent or something.
And they're still promoting it. David Frum on Twitter saying that the Russia-Trump thing is real and that the Twitter files are fake. It's like, what?
And Obama supporters did the exact same thing when he got into office, and then he did the exact opposite of everything he said he was going to do. He's going to stop the wars. He expanded the wars and started new wars.
He got Nobel Prizes for it.
People were making the same excuses for him.
Brian, I can't believe I'm hearing this coming out of your mouth. You know that you're besmirching the name of Saint Obama. What the fuck is the matter with you?
I mean, this is every president. The whole system. The White House has no relevancy. It's like pro wrestling,
puppet theater.
These people are just there for the audience. Yeah. And
I like the one interview that Putin gave. I forget when it was. It was semi-recent, where he was talking about how he has dealt with all these previous administrations, even the Trump administration. And he's like, when these people come in, they want to do the right thing. But then there's guys in suits. They always wear black ties, black shirts, black suits. They come in and they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And he was like, it's the same with Bush.
We won't do it. You tell us to do it, but we're not going to do it.
It was like that with Bush. It was like that with Obama. It was like that with Trump.
Yeah, the famous line from the Clinton administration, Bill, of course, was that he wanted to do some measure. Then he was told, no, you can't do that. And he finally said, he exploded. He said, what, I can't do this because of some fucking bond traders in New York? Yeah, and he didn't. I forget what it was exactly, but yeah, it's other people running things. And right now they're talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's thrown his hat into the ring to be the Democratic nominee. I assume he's Democratic nominee, right?
He's a Democrat,
Yeah, in the United States, it's very childlike. They think that if they get the right daddy, the House will be put in order. And yeah, because like, look, I remember with Obama in 2008, I mean, I'm much older than you guys, and I was on top of that shit, and I was following it. And at first, he was very inspirational. And people have forgotten, of course, but he gave this magnificent speech after he won Iowa, the Iowa caucus over Hillary Clinton. It was a fantastic speech, like just uplifting. And you watch that speech and you're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to follow this fucker, right? And I was on board that thing. I was in Chile at the time, but I was following American politics and shit. And I was like, holy shit, yeah, this fucker, he's the guy. He's going to save the whole fucking thing. And then shortly thereafter, he gave some other speech because there was some controversy about this pastor that he would go to the church service of this pastor, and this pastor was like saying non-politically correct bullshit, right? And he threw that guy into the bus. And then I was like, this fucker is just like all the others.
But so many other people just kept on following Obama, thinking that he would be the savior. And now they're latched onto Trump, thinking that he's going to be a savior. It's the rot is too deep. It doesn't matter who daddy is. The house is still on fire.
System. Yeah, the system is the problem, and the presidency is just another distraction. And they can get people. I mean, look at the paralysis across America when people are engaged in the upcoming, whatever the election is that's coming up. People are paralyzed by it. They think of nothing else. They talk of nothing else. And it's all meaningless because it doesn't matter who you vote.
Being de-dollarized right now, right? We get on these Twitter spaces every single day to cover Trump, and they have these heated discussions. I tried to participate in some of them. Heated discussions about bullshit that doesn't matter. And I have to like break up the space and be like, guys, you're being de-dollarized right now. What are you talking about? Who gives a shit about any of this? Who cares about Trump being indicted by some stupid fucking tin pot DA in Manhattan? It doesn't matter. You will have no economy left. Guys, wake up. Wake the fuck up.
Yeah, that's why they're doing. I mean, that's why who's the first president to be charged in this way? I don't know, because I don't pay attention to any of it. People who watch my videos, I mean, how many times do I talk about the U.S. president?
It's irrelevant.
U.S. elections. Yeah, exactly.
But what's interesting is that, to your point, Ian, the de-dollarization is a catastrophe. I did a video on my other channel. You can go and watch it. I posted it yesterday about the de-dollarization issue and the capital markets, the international capital markets, and what a complete catastrophe it was to cut off Russia from SWIFT. Because, people say that, it hurt the Russian economy. Yeah, marginally it did.
Kind of short term.
Yeah, short term. But the key issue here is that, since they're cut off from SWIFT, and Russia is the largest commodity supplier in the world. If you add up all the commodities,
we have to trade with them, regardless.
Yeah, and so
whether you like them or not,
they cannot trade in dollars. They cannot accept dollars for their commodities because they have nowhere to put them, because they're cut off from the Western system, the dollar system, right? And I remember last year I was talking to some friends, one a current the Federal Reserve economist and one a former. And these guys, when I was writing about finance back in the day in the global financial crisis, I got to know these guys. And they were telling me that, when the war started, the Federal Reserve was just freaking out that they were going to cut off Russia from SWIFT. And the Federal Reserve went begging to the White House, telling them, don't do it, don't do it. And they did it. And because of the cutting off of Russia from SWIFT, now, a year later, we're starting to see this de-dollarization. Because if Russia is selling you commodities, but they won't take dollars, you got to find the currency that they'll accept, be it rubles, rupees, or yuan. And that's what they're doing. And so they are exiting their dollar positions and going into these other currencies. And they are buying those commodities. And those currencies, where do they wind up? They wind up in the capital markets of China, India, Russia. Those markets are benefiting. And the American markets are getting hammered, okay? And right now, the entire capital market system of the United States is being propped up by the Federal Reserve with printed money that is just, fictitious. Yeah. They're fucked. They are fucked to high heaven. Yeah.
Every country that trades with both Russia and the United States is getting rid of their dollar, because they're realizing that on the one hand, you have this service-based economy that doesn't actually have any resources. And then you have Russia, which actually has resources that you need to run your economy in the long run and not get ripped off, because, Americans love to rip people off of their shitty economy. You're going to be like, well, I mean, if we could cut out the middleman, why not? And every country's doing it now, right? Every single developing nation, or even countries like Indonesia, are like Indonesia's president, who, by the way, was promised $20 billion from the Biden administration to promote ESG and climate change stuff. They're he openly is saying that we need to cut off MasterCard and Visa. We can't use them anymore because they're trash. We got to start switching to a different system, one that supports Russia and China. Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
Even in Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, who
yeah, he's supposed to be like a pro-American guy, right? Pro-American.
Like he's the NED guy. He like gets in group pictures with NED in Washington, and I'm still suspicious of him. And people should be very careful about
They should
this.
be,
but I hope I'm wrong.
In our interest.
I hope I'm wrong.
Working in Malaysia's interest right now, because he's like, okay, he sees the writing on the wall. You know, he sees the writing on the wall right now.
I was exactly going to say that.
And like everything he's doing now makes sense for Malaysia. They're like, yeah, let's actually do direct trade with China. Fuck it. Yeah.
That's the tipping point when even the corrupt people who would sell their country out to be on Team America, when they realize that's not going to be to their benefit, it's actually going to be to their personal benefit and coincidentally to their nation's benefit to do business with China and Russia. I think that's what we're seeing. You still got to be real careful. Yeah.
Oh yeah. In the Middle East, it's the same way.
Those like really corrupt and rat-like guys, they always are on the winning side, and so you got to like follow them because they're where it's at. By the way, let me just bring on a Patreon supporter real quick. Ronald, how's it going? Thank you very much for your support. Are you there, Ronald? Ronald, are you there? Okay, sorry, man. You snooze, you lose. Okay, but no, the de-dollarization thing is just a complete disaster and a complete shit show, and there is no way to turn it back for the Americans.
You can't, because they scared the world. They're like, if we don't like you and what you're doing, we're going to cut you off from everything. We're going to try to starve you. And if you're any country who has any sort of value for your sovereignty, you're going to be like, should we be held hostage by these assholes? Or do we trade fairly at Russia and China? Because they're promising us something different. They're saying everything's fair. We're not going to step in and force you to adopt LGBTQ shit just because
LGBTQP shit. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look at the country that just made homosexuality illegal, right?
Uganda,
right? Uganda. They're being sanctioned right now by Americans because of that law. And, if you're another African country or a South American country, you're an Asian country that has these laws on the books already, right? Uganda's not unique. They're going to be like, should I be worried about this? Because they're going to sanction us unless we promote transgenderism. Hell no. We don't want to be beholden to Americans. We want to trade with them, but not at this rate, not at this cost. It's not worth it.
No, and also, you have the issue of the sequestership of foreign assets in the United States with like what they did with.
They wouldn't even let them pay their debts. Yeah.
They stole their money.
They stole their money and tried to force them to default, right? They tried to get them to default. Russia, unfortunately for Russia, they had means to pay it off anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, contractually, it's a very interesting situation, but that's, besides the point. The point is, of course, every other nation in the world that is potentially on America's shit list, everybody there in those countries is thinking to themselves, Jesus, get the fuck out of Dodge now. Because the Americans might turn on us, and I think that right now Saudi Arabia is next on their shit list. I mean,
you have MBS saying in private that he no longer cares to placate or even gives a shit about what America thinks of him or Saudi Arabia. He's going to do what's in the interest of Saudi Arabia, and
he said that. He said
that, yeah.
But
privately,
who did he say it to that you believe that it's the truth of what he said?
His people. And so this is, I forget, maybe it was Business Insider or something that reported it, or FT. I think it might have been FT that reported this. They're more reliable than insiders.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt it because, first of all, MBS hates Biden. By the way, why does every fucking leader hate Biden's guts?
Because he's like a pussy?
No, I think it's because he's a double dealer.
That too. I mean, there's many reasons to dislike the guy. First of all, he's senile. He's got no position being there. He's out of his league. He's out of his depth. I mean, Obama never respected him. He's like, you can trust Biden to always fuck things up, right? I'm paraphrasing.
I remember that phrase. Yeah, that was sort of like the kiss of death, if you ask me. But yeah, I remember that line.
And beyond that, I mean, the guy, like you said, is a double dealer, right? You can't trust him. Everything he says, there's always something else that he's not telling you. I mean, he is arrogant as fuck, right? I mean, when he first became president, he was like, I'm going to hold Saudi Arabia accountable and I'm going to treat them like the pariah they deserve to be treated as because they killed some Muslim Brotherhood journalist, right? Everybody gets into an argument with me about that. Oh, like, he was a real journalist. Yeah. Fun story about that guy. Khashoggi, yeah.
Wasn't it Washington Post? I mean, we all know what they do over at the Washington Post.
Yeah. But fun story about Khashoggi, when Saudi Arabia allowed women to start driving their cars, he was the loudest person against it. He opposed that. Like, this guy is not some lib.
I would too, if we're being strictly honest, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the ally that the West seems to make him out to be, right? Or
none of them are. None of them are.
Yeah.
It's always a relationship.
Navalny is like, you know. But yeah, I'm sorry, Ian. Go ahead. What you were saying?
No, yeah, I mean, like, these guys, like, America always takes the side of the underdog. This is to destabilize whatever regime is in power, to keep them in check. You see them supporting leftists in some countries, and you see them supporting hardcore right-wingers in other countries, like Ukraine, for example. That's hardcore right-wing, right? It's because it destabilizes the whole area. This has been their foreign policy all along. They claim to want to support democracy, which is fucking bullshit because, you know, again, they play both sides. They side the terrorists, like in Syria, obviously siding with the so-called Free Syrian Army, which, as we all know, are Islamists, just a hair short, right? A hair short from being ISIS. A hair short from being ISIS. Yeah, they're Al Qaeda, right?
They didn't get their uniform in the mail yet. That's why
they're the moderate terrorists, right? They're the moderate terrorists. They only use
they'll
one
chop
bomb.
Your hands off, not your head necessarily. Yeah, okay, we get it.
Yeah, and then you have fucking McCain taking photographs with a guy who literally the same day killed a child and recorded a video of it. But he's one of the good guys, you know. Trust him, you know. Just he's fine.
Oh, what's that incident? I forgot about that or didn't hear about that.
McCain was being driven around, right, in Syria, and his driver and his escort happened to be a fucking terrorist who had chopped off a child's head. I watched the video; it was horrific. I wish I could erase it from my memory.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
He was killing a 12-year-old boy.
No, when I hear about those videos like that, I just flip it. I don't want to see that.
Brutal.
Now.
And then taking photos of them, you know, it's like, wow, you literally took a photo of the terrorist, and he's one of the good guys. Got it.
I don't know, they find the absolute worst people in any given country, the ones who are eager to betray their country, the worst terrorists, Nazis, whatever the lowest low in any country is, they scrape them together and they use them. And these are and because the people that sign up to work with the US, they're people that would never achieve anything on their own because they are the lowest of the low. And so it's a natural partnership because they're getting something they want, and the U.S. wants to gut and destroy the country, the targeted country. So it's a win-win for them.
Because people always wonder, why doesn't the United States work with the moderates? Well, because the moderates in whatever country, they want to work within the framework of the system that exists. They don't want to overthrow the whole system in a revolutionary sense. Whereas these crazies, they do. They want to just reinvent the whole fucking country from the ground up in their extremist ideology. That's why the United States supports them. Because the moderate, what's the moderate going to do? He's just going to try to nudge things along in a direction he more or less likes, but still going to be a direction that the United States hates. And so that's why you get this shit. I mean, let me bring on Ronald. Go ahead. Ronald, are you there?
I'll continue after he speaks.
Ronald, are you there? Ronald, dude.
Maybe he can type. Maybe he can type his question in the comment section or something.
Let me see. No, there's nothing in the private chat. Ronald, are you there? Look, I'm happy to have Patreon supporters on, but you got to talk, man. Yeah. So anyway, these all fucking extremists, man, and we're seeing it now. And these, like we were talking about Ukraine, these guys are going to fight to the death. And I suppose that's one of the advantages for the Americans is that these extremists will fight to the death. That's for sure. And so at least they know that once they insert them in there, they're there for life until whatever wipes them out. And so at the end of the day, all you can do is just wipe them out somehow.
I mean, these guys were long before 2014, long before 2008, right? Long before the Euromaidan. For decades, the United States has been backing these right sector guys. Right, and then the Canadian government has been backing these guys. They're huge in Canada. I mean, you have the VP of Canada, Freeland, right? Who by herself, her grandfather is a Nazi, right? So Ukrainian, and so she is marching alongside them. And she knows exactly who these people are. She's not an idiot. She's Ukrainian. She knows who these guys are. Marching alongside them. I mean, the American government and the Canadian government has fostered these groups. I mean, originally it was to fight the Soviets, so to speak, right? They needed, not that the Soviets are bad, oh my God, they're communists. I'm not going down that road. I'm saying that the military-industrial complex needed a reason to exist after World War II, right? The Soviets were, I would say, natural friends of the United States back then. But then after they defeated the Nazis, the military-industrial complex needed something to do with all its infrastructure that built up, because if they didn't have a new enemy, they would collapse, right? They would basically render themselves obsolete. And so they needed to create new enemies. This means, going to war with the communists, fomenting revolutions in this and that country. And of course, I don't want to go too much into this, but the reason why Americans are fucking morbidly obese is because of HFCS, right? High fructose corn syrup. And why does that exist? Well, it was a commodity created during World War II to promote the corn industry, right? And after the war ended, they needed something to do with all that corn. So what did they do? They put it in every single food to justify the existence of that economy, that industry. That's why Americans are all fat, right? That's literally why. You can have the same diet, live in Europe, and not be fucking fat.
Well, maybe if they expand artillery shell production in the U.S., they can bail them out at the end, and we could all get free artillery shells or something. I don't know.
Use them as paperweights.
There's a lot of examples of that. And another thing is the U.S., the leadership, the core leadership, and this has always been a thing. It's impossible for them to respect anyone else. They want domination. The Soviet Union was in their way, and they had to get rid of it. And it didn't matter if it was communist or if it was a republic or whatever it was. They don't care. If it wasn't going to subordinate itself to the U.S., they were going to fight it and subjugate it. That was what was going to happen. That's what their problem is with China right now. This is what their problem is with everybody. They're not interested in working with other people.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you, because the United States was not like that before. The United States was pretty much like, here we are. If your best and brightest want to come here and have opportunities and do whatever you want with your lives, you're more than welcome to, right? I mean, I'm talking like late 19th century, early 20th century. Right now, China seems to be on that same boat of like, you do you and we'll do us and we'll trade and be friends and do you see a time, not now, but like in the next decades, where that would change with China, that they would become just as imperialistic as the Americans? Or do you think that there's some other causal factor in the American imperialism that would not be prevalent in, say, China? Because I mean, we're all in agreement that China is going to be the dominant empire over the next couple of centuries, right? And so the question is, is this a natural evolution of the strongest country, or is it something unique to the Americans that they started insisting on you being just like them, enjoying the same shit that they enjoy in America?
That's a good point. America is a cultural superpower, right? Beyond just being an economic superpower and a military superpower, it is a cultural superpower. It has always enjoyed that position, just like the Romans were a cultural superpower back in their day, right?
Yeah.
And the Ottomans as well. They were a cultural superpower. They expanded the Muslim Empire, for example, the Ottoman Empire, and their version of Islam. So I think this is prevalent to cultural empires. I don't think it's necessarily prevalent to economic empires. And I don't think we've ever seen an economic empire quite like China's. So I really don't see the same thing, because China is like, you do you, boo. They don't seem to care what other people do in their countries, whether you're a Muslim or whether you're a Christian or whether, as long as you don't mess with them, right? They're saying, don't fuck with our kids. Don't promote LGBT stuff here in our country. We'll run our country our way, but we won't tell you what to do. We won't tell you to stop worshiping your God or anything. We just want to keep things our way in our country. Everybody else can just do whatever the hell they want, as long as they just trade fairly with us. So I really don't see China doing that in the short term. Maybe in 100 years when things are different, right? But I think in the next 50 years, I don't think so. Even when they do become a cultural an economic number one.
Yeah,
I mean, they are.
I agree with that.
They are the number one. The BRICS are larger than the G7 now.
Yeah, I want to point out though, the U.S. started out by wiping out the indigenous population all the way to the West Coast. When they got to the West Coast, they started crossing the Pacific. Marines took over Hawaii, overthrew it was a kingdom. They overthrew it. They conquered it. And then the Spanish-American War, Spain lost. So then they began taking over all of their colonies, and anyone who resisted, including in the Philippines. I mean, you want to talk about that they were doing waterboarding back then, and they were torturing and massacring people in the Philippines to subjugate them. So there really was no pause. I mean, from the very beginning all the way until now, that has been the American way. Really, it has been. American people don't think like they don't think that's a positive thing. They don't want to believe that that's true, but it is. I think that's the hope for America, is that most American people would find that wrong and they wouldn't agree with it.
I think they do. Look at Vietnam. I mean, if you listen to interviews with Vietnam War veterans from the 1990s, I think that's like the best time because they were not super old back then. They're talking about how they went in green, like bright-eyed, green, thinking that they'd be welcomed as heroes, saving them from the communist evils and so on. And they're like, these people hated us. They spat on us. They tried to kill us when we were asleep. They didn't want us there, and we had no business being there, right? That is what they all say. Every single combat veteran will tell you that Vietnam was like that. Same thing of Afghanistan. Same thing of Iraq. I mean, obviously, while it was ongoing, there were, very like many instances where you had really good rapport between the U.S. Marines who were sent to like these villages to help them. Obviously, on an individual level, they're good people, right? But now, with what Biden did, with the way he had the disastrous withdrawal that he refuses to take responsibility for, they hate America. They were abandoned. Those people were abandoned to the Taliban. They served with the Americans for 20 years, and now they are like stateless, right? And
the U.S. doesn't care. It's not just Biden. I mean, that would cost money, and they're not going to spend money on these people were dupes. That's how they saw it. There's no place at the table for them.
Some of them, these former special forces guys who have like U.S. special forces training, they're with Russia now. There's like a brigade there that's like nothing but Afghans who are abandoned by the Americans. Yeah.
That's ironic.
So the Americans wound up giving this incredibly expensive training to Afghans who are fighting on the Russian side. Oh man,
it makes sense. I mean, the Russians treat them fairly. So
that would actually make a good novel, by the way.
I mean, like if they go back to Afghanistan, they're going to be killed by the Taliban, right? They're going to be killed by the Taliban. So they're like, the Russians
take my chances with the Russians. Yeah. Oh, that's
and Russians are fair to them.
Getting back to China,
No, I wanted to say that the cornerstone of the Chinese policy is they say it explicitly. We're not interested in fucking with your shit. However you run your country, that's your business. And they say so explicitly. Whereas the Americans say explicitly, we want to turn all your children gay and trans. And there's no choice.
There's this narrative that, I think it's successful because it's prevalent, right? That the Chinese get you into debt slavery, right? They lend you a bunch of money, and then you build your economy up, but then you fuck it up.
The Americans never do that.
Like they do that with JP Morgan and BlackRock, right? BlackRock is probably the number one company that does that, and of course the IMF, which is just a proxy of the Fed.
Yeah.
And America does it all the time, and they project it onto China. But you have to, if you actually read into what China does with these countries that are unable to pay back their debts, they forgive them. They're like, no, we forgive you. You're like, okay, fine, you can't build it up. We'll help you again. Same with Russia. Russia goes to Africa. African countries owe Russia billions of dollars. And guess what Putin did the other day? He forgave their billions of dollars in debt. It's like, you know what? Well, fine. It's fine. We understand it. We'll help you.
They didn't forgive it just for no good reason. They obviously have a
build capital, right? Yeah. To build political capital and to say, hey, we're on your side here. We're not going to screw you like the Americans do.
Yeah, and I think Gonzalo's question is an important question. Is China going to end up just replacing the U.S.? But the way you see China growing on the global stage, the way it does business, it's building real tangible infrastructure. It's not trapping them in debt like the IMF. And then like, what were they even doing with all that money? I have no idea. But China's building physical infrastructure that is going to be valuable to that country. It's going to raise that country up. It's not going to artificially arrest their development like the U.S. has been doing for decades around the world. What they're doing is they're like engineering into the process. They're engineering into the process a way of raising everyone else that will keep their leadership in the future in check, because they have not created a system that will give them the ability to dominate these nations the way the U.S. was able to dominate the undeveloped world. They're developing the world. They are engineering it. Yeah.
But they're not doing it through charity, right? How does America help these countries? It just gives them free money with strings attached, of course, right? Through USAID. That's the State Department. They do that. And these countries, as a result, are stunted, as you mentioned. They're stunted completely. It stunts their ability to grow up their own agricultural, manufacturing industries. What's the point of building an agricultural industry if you have to compete against free stuff subsidized goods from America. I mean, there's just no business in it. You're going to go bankrupt if you were to compete against America. So they don't do anything, right? They're kept poor on purpose. And the UK is the same way, right? UK does this to all these countries as well. Europe in general does this. This is their foreign policy, to keep these countries down and suppress and say, look at how stupid these people are. They need our help, right? Whereas China's like, you know what? We're going to build your infrastructure. We're going to help you build your own businesses, and then you will make your own money, right? Instead of giving them a fish, they're teaching them how to fish. That's what they're doing, and it's successful. It is actually helping Africa. Well, is that so bad? I guess it's bad for America.
and Ian, I mean, the whole thing is, it's good for China too. If you don't have this obsession with maximum profit and wealth and influence, if you're okay you're prosperous, sustainably prosperous, you're helping these other people, everyone is happy, that is best for your long-term
Same with
survival.
Russia, they do that. Yeah, they're doing that in the Central African Republic. They're helping them out.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed is that historically the Soviets and in post-war Soviets and now the Russian Federation, they go out of their way to build strong relationships with countries, even with countries that don't directly affect them.
Like Haiti.
At the time. What?
Yeah, look at Haiti. Look at Haiti right now. The people there are carrying Russian flags. I wonder why. Oh, it's because Mexico, America, and Canada have installed a dictator who killed the previous guy to basically be a tyrant over them. And they're tired of it. They're tired of it. They're being dominated by these Western imperialistic powers, and they're saying Russia's the bad guy. For these guys, it's not. For these guys, it's like, the Russians are our friends. What the hell?
Yeah, and so the point I wanted to make is that you're absolutely right, by the way. But the point is that the Russians go out of their way to build strong relationships, even if they don't need those relationships at the moment. And they go out of their way to be the honest broker. And I've noticed that the Chinese diplomatic efforts, insofar as Iran and Saudi Arabia are concerned, they followed that pattern. Now, I can't speak of Chinese diplomatic efforts in Asia. I simply don't know enough to be able to give an intelligent opinion. But I think that this effort, insofar as Iran and Saudi Arabia are concerned, is a watershed moment insofar as Chinese diplomacy, because they have the big economic power, but they're using it to bring stability and peace as opposed to bringing more chaos. And I think that a lot of other countries in conflict and under the yoke of the global American empire are going to be seeing this and realizing, hey, you know, the Chinese want to truly help us out. And I have to say that the sudden resolution of all the enmity in the Middle East by way of Russia and China, and their efforts in bringing people together and negotiating an end to hostility and chaos, that is a very powerful living example that only adds to the luster of the Eurasian alliance. And more countries in Latin America, in Africa, will want to be part of that somehow, because they realize the Americans only bring chaos, especially in this late decaying American empire stage that we're at. And whereas the Eurasians, they just want you to get along and make money so that they can make money. And they're very straightforward and honest about it.
And China speaks louder than words. I mean, like, for the longest time, they've been quarreling with all these Southeast Asian countries over the South China Sea, right? Who gets the oil rights and all these things. And obviously, China was expanding its bases there. They were building artificial islands, more or less pissing off the countries there, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on, right? And Singapore and Thailand. But now it's like, that's all forgotten, because guess what? They opened up their economy to us, right? Like, we literally, Anwar Ibrahim went there to China and signed multi-billion-dollar contracts with them to do bilateral trade, to do like mutually beneficial industrial development. Not just trade, but actual development. They'll be giving us a ton of money to build up our infrastructure. And it's like, okay, so all the differences that we had previously, that's water under the bridge, because you're giving us something way better, which is a long-term relationship. And this is something that these Southeast Asian countries have struggled with America for the longest time, because there are too many strings attached. And China's like, let's do the same thing that we, like a Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was what that was going to be, right? But if you actually look at the TPP, it is so unbeneficial, right? For any of these countries, they're like, oh, fuck, we're going to kill our industries so that America can benefit. We're going to kill our agriculture because they want ESG in there. Like, fuck off. No,
I was
we want an oil industry.
in Chile, they wanted to push the TPP. I was virulently opposed to it, and everyone was like, "Isn't this going to help us?" No, you're going to be under the thumb of the Americans. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
let
me welcome Pamela, who's a longtime supporter. Pamela, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. This is a wonderful show today. It's really, really great and free flowing. I love it. Do you think Afghanistan will give the military hardware that was left from the U.S. to Russia?
That's a good question.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think they have a lot of. I don't think there was anything that was left behind that was too terribly complicated or significant. I don't think it's really. Yeah, it's not really consequential. I think.
Weren't there planes though and stuff like that?
Not fighters though. They were like training jets. Like a very low altitude. Yeah, low altitude attack craft.
Yeah, and they deliberately gave the Afghans these propeller-driven ground attack aircraft because they didn't want to give them anything sophisticated. I guess they were kind of like, well, we're not really building anything here sustainable. This could all go bad at any time. So if it does, it's just an airplane.
And they're easy to repair, right? It just makes sense logistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when they left some helicopters and people were saying, "Oh, don't worry, we left some helicopters, but they'll never fly them." And like the next day, there was videos of them joyriding on the helicopters. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Like the Blackhawks, they have a ton of Blackhawks, like a whole fleet of them, right? Mm-hmm. They know how to fly them and they know how to repair them. It's not that hard. They're just Blackhawks. There's nothing sophisticated about them. They're not F-16s.
That's a bummer in a way. Anyway, has anybody heard anything further about the depleted uranium? Because that seems to have gone by the wayside.
I think it's something that Russia knows they're not going to change the UK's mind on. They're going to use it. It's going to have this horrible impact if it's used in large amounts. Will they use depleted uranium? Of course, yeah. I think they will. Yeah. I think they
don't have tungsten.
I think so. Yeah, the UK, I think their problem is they have their military is so degraded. This is what they had a stockpile of because the depleted uranium really was supposed to be used in an existential battle against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. They got a stockpile of this. They were not keeping up with ammunition for the Challenger 2 because the Challenger 3 is going to have a smoothbore gun using different ammunition. So they weren't making ammunition, so they're just going to dump it because that's what they do. We were just talking about high fructose corn syrup. Right, this is what they do. So they're just going to dump depleted uranium on Ukraine to get rid of it. To them, it's two problems solved at the same time. They get ammunition for the tanks and they get rid of this depleted
destroy
uranium.
The land, the farmland.
Yeah, they don't care. The UK doesn't live in Ukraine.
They did the same thing to Iraq. I mean, they destroyed the farmland. It's a lot of it is just you can't go across there. Yep.
And you don't think anybody's going to retaliate against that in the EU or anywhere in the vicinity, like in the Baltics? Or, I mean, this is really dreadful.
It is dreadful, yeah, but they don't have any real say. I mean, they can speak up, I suppose, but what can they do? I mean, the UK and the US run the show. The rest of them are beholden to those militaries and defending them. They don't even have armies of their own. They can bluster.
They're not. Everybody can just say no. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the problem also is that the farmland that's going to be ruined is Ukrainian farmland that is going to be part of the Russian Federation forevermore. They already made it official, so for the Russians, they're not going to give up that territory. So as far as the Brits are concerned and the West is concerned generally, they're saying, oh, it's just Russia's problem. We don't give a shit. And if it's contaminated and the foodstuffs that are grown there are ruined and cannot be used to feed people because they're contaminated with radiation, that's their problem. I mean, that's their attitude. I mean, actions speak louder than words, and that's their actions. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't care. Yeah.
And what are they doing about the biolabs? I read yesterday on Zero Hedge they're bringing in the biolabs again.
Oh yeah. The Russians are clearly. Yes. They released. I actually retweeted the pages of the Russian Ministry of Defense that they released like a chart of the people involved, the Americans. And it's clear that the Russians plan on having a very, very big trial after this conflict. And they're going to air out all this shit.
Really? They really need to get a handle on that ASAP, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're definitely going to do that.
Anything else on your mind, Pam?
No, not really. I just wanted to ask, in China, what was the news in China about Macron's visit? Like, what was the rhetoric? Were they angry about his obnoxious behavior?
They were annoyed.
Yeah, the Global Times actually wrote an editorial basically saying that they predicted that Macron would come and lecture them, and then he did. And the editorial was basically, if you come and, because we know that France knows that the U.S. is telling them to do this, and this is not in France, the French people's best interest. So if you come to lecture us, repeating what the U.S. told you, that's basically weakness. You're weak, and there's no reason for us to respect you. That was what the Global Times is saying. And then Macron,
the Global Times is like the brain trust of China. What they're thinking, they're on a pulse of it. They're like the unofficial.
Oh, really?
They're like the unofficial spokespeople for the CCP. Yeah, they'll say what the government doesn't, but that's basically them saying
can't. Yeah,
or can't. Yeah, because it's not
excellent.
diplomatic to say so. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Anyway, you guys are fabulous. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Take care.
There's this Turkish newspaper. It's in English. I forget what they're called, but they're basically Erdogan's mouthpiece, right? Erdogan's mouthpiece. Yeah, I forget the name of it. I was reading a few.
Is it like AA something starts with an A?
I'm still here.
AA
I'm just
something.
refreshing my coffee. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it's
Well, it
AA.
doesn't matter. What's the upshot?
Yeah. Okay, so the upshot was that, and this is a few weeks ago when I was reading this, they said that Erdogan is not happy, and this is like an editorial, is not happy with the Americans because the Americans, not only are they talking to his opposition and they're using the earthquake there to try to destabilize the country and get the opposition, which, by the way, are a bunch of liberals, right, so-called, they're pro-America, right? To get those guys in charge, the General Milley, and this has not been reported anywhere really, but General Milley went to what's the name of the Rojava, right? He went to Rojava to talk to the rebels there, and Turkey does not like that. Like, what are you doing, guy?
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? You're kidding?
Yep.
He did that?
No, he did that. Yeah, he went to visit Rojava, and so that plus Jeff Flake, who's the ambassador to Turkey. Wow, like you couldn't pick a worse person. He's been talking to the opposition.
It's in the name.
Yeah, he's been talking to Erdogan's enemies, right? To his opposition to try to get rid of Erdogan. And he is no longer welcome to talk to any of Erdogan's people. Like he will not be granted any sort of audience at all with the government from now onwards. Like as far as Turkey,
Lynn Tracy, is the new ambassador to Russia that the United States sent.
Oh God! Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Interview where she said that I forget the exact wording, but basically
I got
not
she said something
deferential to her. Basically, is what
you
said.
She said that in every country that she goes to, meaning like Eastern Europe, South America, everybody treats her like she's the boss. They treat America like America's in charge. But she said that in Russia is the only place that she has gone to. I assume she's never been to China. That Russia is the only place she's gone to where they did not act like they were subservient to the United States, and it was extremely appalling to her. She's just not used to it. This entitled bitch.
Well, that's the American leadership. They're all like that. That is at the core of their problem is they see a foreign policy that is unsustainable, but there is no other foreign policy that they could pursue because they feel that they are entitled to all of this. Everyone should worship them. They should be number one. President Biden even said it. We're not allowing China to surpass us. It doesn't matter that they've got several times the population, a bigger industrial base, millions more graduating engineers graduating every year. That doesn't matter. We're still going to be number one.
Yeah, Americans. That's the irony of Americans, right? American liberals in particular. Right? I'm not talking about conservatives here. They actually believe in American exceptionalism. They believe that they can churn out gender studies graduates and still be at the top of the world because they believe in the exceptionalism of Americans. And yet they're doing everything in, maybe not necessarily in their power, because I don't think it's on purpose, but they're fucking things up. They're not producing good graduates. They're producing idiots. They're producing the colleges have gotten rid of their admissions, right? There's no more SAT requirement. There's nothing like that. Now it's like, are you black? Are you gay? Are you trans? Okay, you're in. If you're white, male, straight, and you got a high GPA, 5.5. Who gives a shit? You're out. You know,
Yeah,
we don't want
you saw that guy who was like the straight A student, like varsity sports and everything, all kinds of resume shit. And he applied to the Ivies and he didn't get accepted to any
Not
of
a single
them.
one.
Whereas
not
this
even the low Ivies.
This black girl who didn't even have a particularly good scores or grades even, she got into all of them. It's like, what the fuck, man?
Equity.
I mean, yeah.
No, it's
not
not equity.
This is the thing.
They call it equity.
They call it. If you point this out, you say you're racist. But no, I'm saying this kid, this white kid, is better.
He deserves to be there.
This black girl.
But they're saying that's racist. They're saying
he is. You know, just
he is. But they don't believe in that.
Yeah,
they don't believe in quantitative differences.
There's no one more racist than the people running the U.S. right now. And again, they're using that. They don't, you know, if you had a university churning out engineers and people actually majoring in important subjects that gave you an understanding of the world, the first thing you would understand is the people in Washington and on Wall Street need to go. They don't want that. So they're going to play these games, and I deal with this. There is real racism in the U.S. I grew up in the U.S. I saw it. I saw it all around me. We moved from New York to a very racist kind of place, and relative to where I was in New York, very racist. And I had people say, "Well, Brian, I mean, look, they push all of this gender and race equality. So why are you saying America's race? It is a racist place, and this woke, whatever you want to call it, this is a distraction. This is artificial. This is only to divide people and distract people. It's the only purpose.
It's disgusting.
And then at the end of the day, the people organizing all of this and policing everybody and dictating who's racist and who isn't, they themselves are incredibly racist. They can't allow China to surpass them, no matter how little sense it makes to think that. Why? Because China is not white. That's the reason why. I mean, that's the real reason why.
I believe that. It's the reason why I'm the only person, like a political commentator, where people bring up that I'm not American, but they have no problem getting people like Paul Joseph Watson, who I respect him. So I'm not throwing shade on him. No problem with Australians who are white having political opinions on America, but God forbid Ian Miles Cheong has a fucking opinion because he's not white. I get that all the time. It's like, and I look at
I've seen that. I've seen people say that. They're like, "You're from Malaysia."
Yeah, and then I dig into it. And it's like, you eat dogs, you eat bugs. It's like, okay, so you are a fucking racist. Like, I don't want to use the race card here, but sometimes I gotta just got pointed out like it is.
Yeah,
there's
actual
racism.
You know, I play the Latino card, man. I come from the barrio, cabrón. South Central, cabrón, man. Homes that represent all that shit. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, let me bring on real quick Ina, who's a Patreon supporter. Ina, how's it going? How are you? How can I help you?
Hi, Gonzalo.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much for your job, guys. We really appreciate your opinion. And thank you so much for bringing reasonability and common sense to this world. And that's what we need the most right now. My youngest son, Theodore, he wants to ask you something, Gonzalo, because I said that you are a YouTube star and you are residing into Ukraine itself. And for us as a family, Kharkov is a very special place because there is a monument over my relative, my grandfather's uncle, who has a monument. He was an engineer in the Kharkov tank factory, and that's why for me, Kharkov is it's a place where my heritage is established. Thank you so much. Theodore wants to ask you something.
All right. So I saw.
Just say hello.
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 So I heard you just talking about how China will surpass us in the following future. But I've seen a lot of videos seeing how China is going under a population collapse, as every country has a population peak and then they'll fall, and that's what I'm currently seeing. And not to mention how they, like Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, those are very political adversaries for China, but those are called China's nightmare. So they need to get their end.
Ask the question.
No, that's.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Take your time. Take your time. There's no rush.
So China, although it has heavy industry, I heard first they're running out of people to they're running out of oil and gas, and they're running out of water. And India, probably having more people than China at this point,
Yes.
might start to invade, because China, with its desperate situation for water, might start to dam up the Himalayas to bring water. So I don't think China is like inevitable to become stronger than US, because they're running out of oil. Well, they have Russia to supply oil, but there's pipelines.
Question.
Look, I'm trying to explain that.
Okay, take your time. Okay, so you're asking, the basic question. The basic question is that because of China's internal problems, that China will never surpass the United States because of its internal problems of demographics, water supply, and the other countries that are antagonistic towards China surrounding it, right? And especially India. And, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not saying that they're never going to surpass us. It's just that in their current state, and not to mention during their zero COVID policy, which I still think goes on to this day, there's been protests and riots. So
what is the question? So what is the specific question?
So how, with this current situation, since America has a large amount of allies, they have enough to supply their industry, but China doesn't have as many allies. So how are they going to surpass with their current demographic issues?
That's a very good question. Okay, thanks very much. Yes, and we're going to answer them. Ian, you want to take it?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll answer one at a time. And off the top of my head, Lake Baikal in Russia has enough water to supply China with, because China right now is getting most of its water from the south of China. And obviously, it's expensive to transport things from down south to the north, right? Because the north is pretty much out of water. And so with Lake Baikal being in Russia, they can actually build a pipeline there, assuming, or simply trade with them, right? It's more likely you're going to build a water pipeline from Lake Baikal to China to supply the water in northern China. So I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue as people think it is. I don't think they're going to have to dam up the Himalayas, because they're more interested in allying with India, as we can see right now with the joint trade that they're doing, rupees to yuan. So I don't think they're going to mess that up by damming them out. That would be an act of aggression. That would be a war. They're not going to do that, because they see a bigger threat right now, and it's a weakened threat. It's America, right? So they're going to unite with that. As for their human shortage problem, right? The manpower shortage. I don't think it's as much of a problem as people think it is. Obviously, it's a big issue. But what they can do is, with their young men, export them overseas, right? Like, these young men need jobs, they need something to do. What do? Well, there's a lot of countries in Africa, and of course there's Russia. There's Chinese industries in Russia where these men can go and work, and that actually solves Russia's problem of not having enough manpower. So you send these single men up north, they work there, they make a good living, and maybe they marry into the Russian population. Who knows? I mean, I don't think they'd be opposed to that either way. And they do have policies that are being put in place right now to help build up these families, to make them larger. So it's a short-term problem where they will have a shortage of people, but I don't think it's something as catastrophic as what we're actually seeing in the West, or for instance in America or in Italy. I think Western Europe is hardest hit by this, where they are at catastrophic levels where they will become extinct within 100 years or so, because they just won't be able to produce enough people. So, or bodies, right? But China doesn't really have that long-term problem. It's more like a short-term problem, as I see it, because like Russia, they are helping these families, invigorating them, having them, people produce 4 kids instead of like 1, right? So I don't think that's going to be a long-term issue.
Okay.
They're in Russia, for instance. In Putin's last speech, he deliberately implemented several policies that were very key and very popular in Russia, precisely to address the demographic issue. And in China, they will be, or they are in the process of doing the same. I would recommend, I'm sorry, Ina, your son's name is Fyodor?
Yeah, Fedya.
Okay, Fyodor, let me explain to you. You're probably listening to Peter Zeihan. Peter Zeihan is...
I was just going to say.
Peter Zeihan is a propagandist for the United States.
Okay, wait.
And his job, his job is to create very slick videos that convince you that the United States problems are temporary and that everything will work itself out, and that China and the rest of the world is going downhill and will be, just collapse any day now. It's his job because he is paid for by American institutions, specifically the State Department, the Department of Defense, and the military industrial complex, the various corporations like Raytheon, General Dynamics. They pay him to say this so that they convince themselves. So you have to understand what's going on. And a lot of the videos that you've probably been watching are by Peter Zeihan. He's this guy with a beard, kind of like mine, but no glasses, and his hair tied up in a bun or something. Or other people like him.
Подожди, дальше
Okay. Did Ian and I answer your questions?
Yes. Okay, but I have other. One.
Okay, last one.
We are
Last
limited on
one.
time.
And
I'm sorry.
Brief to the point,
Okay.
please.
So, but what I've seen, since most like the EU, they don't have a very friendly foreign policy to immigrants. So does China. So, but America has the reason most people immigrate to America because of its friendlier immigrant policies.
No, that's not accurate. Because in Europe, there's a huge wave of immigrants that have been coming in from Turkey and from North Africa and the Middle East generally.
Those are refugees. Am I wrong? Those are refugees.
They're economic refugees. Economic refugees. They're
What does that
basically
mean?
immigrants.
It means that
It's a
people are
term.
coming. Doesn't matter how you name it. It's still people are coming and they're replacing their regular population.
Okay.
And
Okay, Tichka, you're done. Like next time, you'll just take a time. Say thank you.
thank you, but I'd like to ask more.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm so
Okay.
sorry. Thank you
That's
so
all
much.
right. That's all right.
You're
He's
welcome.
a bright kid.
You're
Like
welcome.
when I was his age, I wasn't involved into the politics that hard, and for me, it's a big mystery why he's involved in that
I
hard.
have more questions that he didn't.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience, Gonzalo. Take a good care of yourself, and I'll see you next week, gentlemen. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. Bye.
You're welcome.
Also,
was
Peter
wonderful.
Zeihan is like the cope guru for the West
Pretty much.
and
What,
the inevitability
Peter
of Asia surpassing. Yeah, Peter Zeihan. I mean, the guy's been saying China's going to collapse in 30 days for like the last
He's
2
like,
years that I've known about it.
He's like a Gordon Chang, right? China's a paper tiger, a paper dragon, whatever the fuck term he uses. And it's like, you've been talking about a Chinese collapse for how many decades now? 3 decades since what, 1995? What are you talking about? China is
Well, like I
stronger
said,
than ever.
Like I said,
You gotta go to China. Yeah, you got to
And
go
like-
to China. When you see it with your own eyes, you realize that if every nation has this problem, if a nation is going to sort it out, it's going to be China.
Yeah, I mean the
Go
mass
there and see
protests.
it.
Remember that? Which is obviously
Mass
State
protests,
Department
yeah.
backed, right? State Department backed.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. They're all students, so of course, wasn't that big. First of all, and they got what they wanted, so they all shut up. They all shut up because all they wanted was one thing: stop locking us up in our houses. Pretty simple demand. And when China was like, okay, fine, you're like, oh, I guess we have nothing else to complain about. But in general, I know a lot of Chinese people. I do, like I actually buy keyboards from them, and believe it or not, like custom keyboards. And they're just like, oh, fine, the government will get it under control. No worries. It sucks, sure, but we're just patient. It's not a big deal. We got a business to run in the long run. We're not going to give up just because of they did the lockdown for 2 months. So what? They trust their government. Believe it or not, the Chinese people trust their government, which is not something I can say about the West, because the West has lied to their people repeatedly to the detriment of the people, bankrupting them. Did China bankrupt its own people? No. Like, yeah, they locked them down, but they didn't fuck up their businesses. At the end of the day, that's what you care about. You care about your livelihood. You care about not going homeless. You care about being able to pay rent. And China, for all the lockdowns, and yeah, they were terrible. I don't agree with them at all. But for all that crap that they did, they had a broad support network that was able to support the people. They didn't bankrupt them. Same can't be said about Americans who lost their businesses and their livelihoods or went to jail.
No, I saw in the comment section someone talking about ADV China show, these two white racist morons who talk about how China doesn't put black people in their movie posters. And I just asked someone I knew in China, Winston Sturzel and what's his name? The other one.
Wow, or something like that he calls himself. Yeah.
I just asked someone I know that lives in China. It's like,
those are feds, man. They're not real.
I don't know. I think there's a big market in the West for this stuff, and they're on the gravy train. But I just asked someone, hey, can you go to the movie theater? I know this is weird. Can you just take a picture of this? Also Dune. You did the Dune reference earlier. Yep. About the prison planet. So they did, and of course it's the same movie poster everywhere else. And so they're just lying. They're lying. They're lying. Do that.
They always do that. They try to portray China as like this racist place.
The Star Wars poster, because
that is more Disney than China. That's Disney, right? That's the issue with Disney, is that everything they try to promote in China, they think, oh, how are the Chinese? I guess the Chinese are racist. We'll remove the black guy from the poster. That's Disney. It's not the Chinese government that's saying, don't put these guys on the poster. There is no edict like that. China, their only edict is don't make the main character gay or trans. That's literally it. That's literally it. Like, that is their law. They said, do not promote degeneracy. I think that's fair, right? You want to promote a healthy culture. Don't promote degeneracy. Okay, so no gay or trans characters. Fine.
And the Dune poster had all the characters, including there were 2 black women, 2 black actresses, and they were both on the movie poster that was used all across China. So again, this is stuff that they make up. They make this stuff up. And it's a lot of it's projection. It's projection. It's what they're thinking.
Right? The audience loves to have China bad, China bad. So they eat it up. They watch it and they're like, oh, look, those Chinese people are so much worse than we are.
There was a time when there was like China good. Like, remember the movie The Martian? That was a good movie, and it was. The Americans sent up like some rocket and blew up, and so the Chinese came in and saved the day. The Chinese were actually like the good guys, right? There was a period there where the Chinese were like the good guys. They did it with the
Russians too, right? I mean, there's a lot of, well, maybe not so much of the Russians, but like I remember watching, was it Salt? Is a movie with like Angelina Jolie, and she plays like a Russian double agent or something. Right? And like in that movie, they have like a stand-in for maybe not Vladimir Putin, but like some fucking puppet leader for Russians, right? And he's being like attacked by or kidnapped by the ultra nationalists. Call of Duty does the same thing, right? But it's like the real Russians, they're the good guys, and they support the American liberal agenda. Like, they were always portraying Russia as this weak puppet government that's friendly to the United States, who are moderates, liberals, right? And then there's these far-right ultra-nationalists. All projection, by the way, because if you look at who the far-right ultra-nationalists that America supports, like Navalny is a far-right ultra-nationalist who's a racist with white supremacist background, and has all these Azov battalion type people supporting him. Oh, guess who supports him? It's America, right? Yeah. He's the fucking Nazi.
Oh, a final question before we wind down the show. What's happened with Georgia? Because remember there were all these protests over the transparency bill, which the guys who tried to pass it in the Georgian parliament, they literally copy pasted the American edict on transparency of non-governmental organizations. They literally did. Yeah, and the FARA, which is from 1938, okay? It's not exactly like a new thing. And they copy-pasted that, and there were all these, and I tweeted out, look at all the foreign agents protesting, because, I mean, who else would protest this thing?
You know what's ironic about this? They tried to call it a pro-Russian law, right? That's in the media, right? But guess what? It wasn't the pro-Russian people who came up with this. It was the anti-Russians who came up with the law to shut down Russian disinformation. And then when they were doing the digging, they kind of realized, like, all the foreign disinformation activists are these NGOs, George Soros, and all these other fucking assholes who are trying to manipulate Georgian elections and Georgian politics. They're all Americans. Wow, what a shock! It's not even the Russians.
I gotta look into that. I didn't know that. It's kind of complicated in Georgia because they have a president that was like, I forget where they were when this protest was going down, but it seemed like there's a lot of moving pieces there. You really got to look and follow the money and really sort it out, because analysis by analogy, like comparing it to something else similar, that usually, it's a good starting point, but that's no way to draw conclusions.
It's the same with Hungary, right? I mean, they're a totally different situation where right now you have Orban, who's enjoys popular support, and I wouldn't say he's pro-Russian, but he's certainly not pro-European Union, not pro-NATO, right? Even though he is in both organizations, but that's for his own safety.
He's a Hungarian nationalist. That's what he is.
He's a Hungarian nationalist,
and he doesn't give a shit about anybody else.
And his views actually quite align with Russia's and China's, because what do they want? They don't want a global unipower thing, right? They want everybody to have their own sovereignty. And, for all intents and purposes, Orban is alongside with them because it benefits Hungary to be a part of this. I could actually see him in sort of, say, 5 years from now, when NATO and the European Union are so severely depleted that he will just go his own way and be part of the Silk Road Initiative, right? The Belt and Road. Yeah. Because why the hell not?
I would not be surprised if the Russians deliberately wind up taking, as part of the territory that they will annex, up to Transnistria, precisely so as to have a shared border with Hungary. Yeah.
Yep.
And
I think that would be a smart move.
Yeah. And geographically,
I hope they do it.
They probably will. Look, my thinking, wasn't it Medvedev who actually tweeted out or on Telegram put out a map of the future Ukraine? And he basically just lopped off big chunks of it.
Yeah, I mean, he is saying what everybody's thinking. That's the thing, right? He says what people are thinking, and people get so offended by it. They're like, "Oh my God, he's tweeting crazy shit again." It's like, but is he though? Like, this is what everybody wants.
It's not that crazy. Yeah, it's actually, it only seems crazy because it's so divergent from typical Western narratives. But when you go out and you look at what's really going on in the world, and then you look at these Western narratives, that's what's actually crazy.
This is what I like about the Russians, is that you have their foreign minister and a spokesperson, spokeswoman, and Dmitry Peskov going on television, just being normal, not lying to people. They're just like normal, and they're human. They sound like humans. They don't deliver this boilerplate bullshit. Well, like, Karine Jean-Pierre, nothing that comes out of her mouth is true.
She's stupid.
She's not qualified. She couldn't answer the questions if her life depended on it. And that's all they do, is they put these people in there. It's all camouflage. I don't know where the qualified people are in U.S. politics, because I don't pay attention to the White House or even Congress. I go to the think tanks, and even there they're all insane and they don't make sense. They all got degrees in like international relations. They've never had a real job in their life. They don't know how the real world works. And I think it's you, Gonzalo, that always talks about how it's, they're not responsible for America being the power that it is. They inherited it, and they're
not. I've said it multiple times. These kids, these people running things are the trust fund babies who inherited a huge fortune of some grandfather, and they're frittering it away at just lightning pace. It's okay. I'm going to draw an end to the live stream because I've decided that I want to keep these to a manageable length. We've gone on 2.25 hours.
Not like 5 hours. So you don't want to do 5 hours, Gonzalo? What's wrong with you?
I love 5 hours.
Take a nap.
Nice.
So, guys, stick around. Chat, I hope you enjoyed the show. To my Patreon supporters, thanks very much for having come on. And I'll see you on Tuesday. I don't know what show is going to be on, what's the show for Tuesday, but when it happens, you'll know. And I'm going to keep on doing the roundtables, and and every day that I'm not doing a roundtable, I'm going to be continuing to do free videos, because I'm I took a month and a half long pause after my motorcycle accident, and I want to get back on the horse, So anyway, thanks very much. Why don't you see out my guests with thank you with +1. I'm glad you liked the show, and I'll catch you next time. Take it easy.